3 fingers, 2 folded. She pressed her hand flat against the counter and prayed someone in that diner was still paying attention, because the man who had just walked through the door had spent 9 days finding her, and she had run out of places left to go. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She raised 3 fingers beneath the counter, folded 2, and held them there for the count of 3, while Nathan Vale settled into the booth like a man who had already won. 2 years of running, 2 years of new towns, new names, new uniforms. Same tired smile pressed onto a face that had forgotten what rest felt like. She thought Nevada would be different. She was wrong. And the only person in that diner who saw what her hand did, a silver-haired biker sitting alone at the counter with cold coffee and older scars, was about to become the answer her father had built before she knew she needed one. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're watching from. Stay until the very end, because this story doesn't just end, it lands. The cold came early to Ridgeback that year. Not the kind of cold that apologizes for itself with gray skies and a little wind. The kind that comes down off the high desert like it has a destination and a deadline, pressing grit off Route 93 against every window in town, and making the few travelers still moving through the valley keep their eyes forward and their heaters maxed. By the first week of November, the temperature had already cracked the mud along the highway shoulder, and Ridgeback, Nevada, sat in the middle of it the way it always sat in the middle of everything, quietly, unremarkably, as a place you passed through on the way to somewhere that mattered. Laura Voss had found the diner the way most people find the things they actually need. By accident. By desperation. At the tail end of a night that had already taken more than it gave. 14 months ago, she had pulled into the parking lot with $43 in her wallet, a 7-year-old asleep in the back seat, and a gas tank running on fumes and stubbornness. Meredith Calloway, who owned Ridgeback Diner and kept it open because she believed in 2 things with equal conviction: strong coffee and the moral obligation of a lit sign on a dark road, had poured Laura coffee without being asked, had looked at the dark circles under her eyes and the careful way she angled her body toward the exit, and had offered her a job without asking a single question. That was the thing about Meredith. She had seen enough to know when a woman was carrying something she hadn't put down yet. Laura had learned the diner the way she learned every new place. Quietly, methodically. The booths ran along the east wall, cracked vinyl patched with electrical tape in 3 places. The counter had 8 stools, 2 of which wobbled badly enough that regulars knew to avoid them. The kitchen door swung inward, which meant anyone coming through it would be momentarily blind to the dining room. She had noted that on day 1. The back exit led to a narrow alley and was locked from the inside with a single bolt she personally verified every morning before the breakfast rush. She was not paranoid. She was trained not by any school or program or official protocol, trained by 2 years of running, of waking at 2 in the morning to check that her car hadn't been moved, of teaching herself which details mattered and which were noise, trained by a childhood with a father who had believed practically and without sentiment that situational awareness was the difference between having options and having none. Her father was gone now, dead of a heart attack at 61, buried outside Flagstaff, with a headstone that didn't say nearly enough about who he was. But the things he had taught her were still here, still running like a current beneath everything she did, including the signal. 3 fingers raised, 2 folded, palm down, never above the counter, never visible to whoever was standing on the other side. He had called it the family flag, a private emergency system built for a world that hadn't yet required it. He had made her practice it at the kitchen table when she was 9 years old. She had laughed at first because it felt like a game. She understood later that he had not been playing. She had used it exactly once before today, the morning that split her life into before and after. She did not think about that morning often. She had gotten very good at not thinking about it. The Thursday that changed everything began ordinarily enough. Laura arrived at 5:45, unlocked the back door, verified the bolt, started the first pot of coffee. Chloe was at school by 7:30, dropped by a Dolores, her retired neighbor who asked too many questions, but kept them to herself and had never once failed to show up. The breakfast rush came and went, 2 truckers, a California family moving through in a rented van, old Chester, at his regular stool reading a paper he had already read twice for the comfort of the routine. Laura refilled coffee, called orders back to the kitchen, kept her back to the wall when she could. She moved through the room the way water moves through a narrow channel, finding the path of least resistance, never wasting emotion, always knowing where the edges were. By 10, the diner had quieted to its mid-morning hum. Meredith was doing paperwork in the back. Danny the cook was eating his own breakfast with the efficiency of a man who had spent too long in the service kitchens to taste anything. The radio above the pass-through played country music at a volume that was more presence than sound. Laura was wiping down the counter when she heard the engines. Not one, three, maybe four. The sound came from the direction of the highway, low rhythmic, unmistakable. Harley engines have a particular voice, a deep mechanical bass note you feel in your sternum before you hear it in your ears. She didn't look up immediately. Motorcycles passed through Ridgeback regularly, but these didn't pass. They slowed. She heard the pitch drop and shift the way an engine changes when you're pulling a turn, and then the specific staccato of four bikes rolling across a gravel lot. Then silence. She looked up. Four men coming through the door one at a time, the way men come through doors when they are not trying to make an entrance but simply do not fit through one simultaneously. The first was tall, mid-40s beard going gray at the edges. The second was shorter and compact, with a shaved head and a tattoo that climbed from his collar to his jaw, so integrated into the skin, it looked less like ink and more like a scar that had healed decoratively. The third was built like someone who had done serious physical labor for most of his life, broad through the shoulders, slow-moving in the deliberate way of large men who have learned not to rush. He had a limp that was barely there but present. And the fourth man walked in last and sat at the counter without making eye contact with anyone. Laura noticed him the way you notice a change in air pressure before a storm. He was older than the others, silver hair close-cropped with 3 days of stubble, on a face that carried its history openly. A scar along the left jaw, another smaller one through the right eyebrow. The particular flatness around the eyes of someone who had learned a long time ago not to show surprise. He was not large. He wasn't trying to be. He sat at the counter the way a stone settles into a riverbed without announcement, without effort, in a way that suggested he had always been there and would remain after the water changed direction. He looked at the menu. He did not look at her. Laura poured coffee for the table where the others had settled, took their orders, eggs mostly, and one request for a burger at 10 in the morning, which Danny would make without judgment, and came back to the counter. "Coffee," she said. The silver-haired man nodded once, turned the cup right side up without looking at it. She poured. He wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at the rain-streaked window at the front of the diner and said nothing else, and neither did she. The interaction was so unremarkable, she filed it away and moved on. She would think about that moment later. The ordinary weight of it. The way normal things contain the seeds of everything that comes after. It was 11:47 when Nathan Vale walked through the door. She knew it was him before she looked up. The way animals know when a predator has entered a field not through sight or sound, but through something older than either. Something that fires a signal directly to the nervous system and bypasses language entirely. Her hand stopped moving. The cloth she had been using to wipe the counter went still. She looked up. He was standing at the entrance with his hands in the pockets of a dark jacket. Hair shorter than she remembered. Face a little thinner. He looked like a man who had been doing something purposeful for a long time and had finally arrived where he intended to be. He was not angry. That was the thing about Nathan that people who hadn't lived near him never understood. He was almost never visibly angry. He was worse than angry. He was patient. He looked at her and smiled. Not warm, not cruel. The particular smile of a person who has been proven right about something they were told they were wrong about. The smile of an answer returning after a long journey. "Hey, Laura," he said. She didn't answer. He walked to a booth and sat down, and she stood at the counter with the cloth in her hand and the full weight of exactly how bad this was pressing down on her chest like something physical. She would learn later it had been 9 days since he had left their last known location, a town in eastern Utah, where she had lived for 4 months before a tagged photograph on a mutual friend's social media forced her to move again. 9 days of driving, of asking questions in the careful way Nathan asked things, of presenting himself as a worried former partner, a concerned friend, a man simply trying to reach someone he cared about. He was very good at that presentation. She had believed it herself once. She thought about the back door. She thought about Chloe at school 7 miles away, due to be picked up by Dolores at 3:15. She thought about her car parked in its usual spot behind the building. And she calculated the road the way she had taught herself to calculate it, not in hopes but in options. Could she make it to the back before he stood up? Could she make it to the parking lot before he reached her? Could she call Dolores without him seeing her pick up her phone? She didn't know. And Nathan knew she didn't know. That was also part of it. The uncertainty was a tool he used as deliberately as anything else. Meredith came out of the back and stopped when she saw Laura's face. She was a perceptive woman. She looked at the booth, looked back at Laura, and her own expression shifted into something careful and alert. "You okay?" she said quietly, passing behind the counter. "Yes," Laura said. The word came out flat and automatic. Meredith did not look convinced, but she moved back toward the kitchen without pushing it. Laura understood that Meredith was giving her space to handle it the way she needed to, which was both kind and completely insufficient. And that insufficiency was not Meredith's fault. It was a simple feature of a world that had not been built to protect women like Laura from men like Nathan. Nathan raised his hand when she didn't come to his table. She walked over, set down water and a menu, kept her eyes at a point slightly above his head, a technique she had developed that looked like eye contact from a distance but required none of the actual engagement. "Long drive," he said. "What can I get you? Coffee." A pause. "Please." The please dropped in last like a coin into a cup offered as evidence of reasonableness. She turned, she got the coffee, she brought it back. He reached out as she set it down and his hand closed around her wrist. Not hard, not violently, just firmly enough that she would need to make a deliberate decision to pull free. And if she pulled free here in this diner in front of whoever was watching, it became a scene. If it became a scene, he became the victim of an unreasonable reaction. And she knew all of this in a single second before she stopped moving. "I just want to talk," he said, "and that's all." She did not speak. "2 minutes. You owe me that." She did not look at him, but she looked at the counter and she saw the silver-haired man watching. Not staring, not obviously watching. The kind of watching that most people would not recognize as watching at all. A slight adjustment in the angle of his face. A stillness in the hands around the coffee mug that had not been there a moment ago. He was looking at the window, but she understood with sudden and complete certainty that he was not seeing the window. He was seeing her. He was seeing her wrist. He was seeing the hold. And something in the quality of his stillness, the way he did not react, did not look alarmed, did not shift his posture toward intervention, told her that he had seen this before, that he was not surprised, that he was assessing. Laura had been assessed that way exactly once in her life. At 15, when her father had taken her to a small, unremarkable building outside Tucson and introduced her to an old friend named Decker, who had looked at her with the same quality of stillness and said, "James Voss's kid. Yeah, I can see it." She had not understood what that meant then. She understood something adjacent to it now. She looked at the man for exactly 1 second, just one. Then she did what her father had taught her to do, what she had practiced at the kitchen table at 9 years old, and used once memorably and never again until this moment. She kept her hand flat against the surface of the counter. She raised 3 fingers. She folded 2. She held it for the count of 3 and lowered her hand. Nathan was still talking. Something about a long drive, about reaching out to mutual friends, about the way she had just disappeared, the word appearing naturally in his narrative, as though disappearing was something done to him rather than something she had done deliberately to survive. She heard the words and did not hear them the way you hear a radio without the content, because every available piece of her attention was pointed at the man at the counter and the fraction of a shift she had seen in him when her hand dropped back to the surface. His eyes moved to the window. His hands did not move. His expression did not change. But he exhaled slow, controlled the breath of someone receiving information rather than processing a surprise. And when he set his coffee mug back on the counter, he did it with a particular deliberateness, like a man placing a marker on a map. And Laura felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope. She did not trust hope. Hope was a luxury that had cost her before, but something below hope, something structural, something that did not require belief, only calculation. She pulled her wrist free from Nathan's hand with careful, minimal force. "I'll come back to take your order," she said. The sentence was professional and level and revealed nothing, and she walked away before he could respond. She went to the kitchen, stood at the pass-through and gripped the edge of the counter and breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth 3 times the technique she had taught herself for getting her heart rate down when it had no business being that elevated in a situation that still required her to function. Danny looked over from his station. You good? Need a minute. Take two. He turned back to the grill, which was his version of giving her privacy, and she appreciated it the way she appreciated most things people did for her, quietly, practically, without making it complicated. She thought about Chloe, 7 years old, brown hair from Laura's mother's side. A serious expression she wore like weather and then broke without warning into the kind of laugh that rearranged whatever room it was in. Chloe, who had spent more of her life in motion than settled, who had learned at 5 to accept new schools and new bedrooms without complaining, who still sometimes woke at night with nightmares she wouldn't describe and pressed herself against her mother's side until she was ready to be alone again. Chloe, who deserved better than this, who was currently 7 miles away at an elementary school that did not know her mother was standing in a kitchen trying to steady her hands while the man who had made both their lives into a sustained emergency sat in a booth eating nothing and waiting. 3:15, Dolores, the pickup. Laura took her phone from her apron pocket, opened a message thread, typed, "Today might be complicated. Can you stay with C until I call? I'll explain later." She watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, reappear. Of course, don't rush. She put the phone away. She went back out. Nathan had ordered the eggs. He ate them with the concentrated, unhurried focus of a man who was not leaving anytime soon, checking his phone, occasionally watching her cross the room, never approaching again, but making sure she knew he was there. That was the architecture of it. The presence was the message. The message was, I know where you are. I will always know where you are. There is no version of the next 24 hours that doesn't include me. She delivered his cake without speaking. He tipped exactly 15%, the tip of a man who wants to appear reasonable without actually being generous. She had always found that revealing. She cleared his dishes. She went back to the counter. The silver-haired man was still there. He had ordered a second coffee, and after a pause, a piece of apple pie he had not yet touched. His 3 companions at the table behind him were talking among themselves at a volume low enough that she couldn't catch words, only tone, the level, unhurried tone of people who are comfortable waiting. She noticed that the compact one with the tattoo had moved to a seat with a direct line of sight to the parking lot through the front window. She had not seen him move. She had not noticed the repositioning until it was already done. They were not here by accident. She brought the silver-haired man a refill without being asked. He looked at her when she poured, not at her face advisedly, at her, the whole of her, the assessment she had identified still running, still quiet. Quiet town, he said. Mostly, she said. A pause. Your dad ever talk about the Ironbound? The coffee pot nearly slipped from her hand. She caught it, set it down carefully, looked at him. He was watching the window again. Her heart was doing something complicated. The word Ironbound had not been part of her vocabulary for 3 years, had not been part of anything since the funeral. Since the quiet afternoon in Flagstaff, when she had stood at a grave and listened to a small group of men she barely knew speak briefly and without elaboration about a man they had loved in the particular understated way that certain men love other men, through presence and silence, in the simple act of showing up over many years. She had not recognized them, had not known their names, had been too deep in her own grief to ask questions she would have known to ask later. What did you say? She said. The man turned the coffee mug slowly in his hands. Name's Warren, he said. Warren Grady. I rode with your father for 11 years. Saddleback Ironbound out of Flagstaff. A pause. James Voss was the best man I ever knew, and I made him a promise before he died that I've been waiting 3 years to find a reason to keep. Laura could not speak. That man in the booth, Warren said quietly without moving his head, followed you here from Utah. Her breath left her. I know, she said. He's been watching your schedule for at least a week, maybe more. She said nothing. Your daughter. A beat. She gets out at 3:15. The words landed with the particular weight of information spoken by someone who had done the work, who hadn't guessed. How do you know that? She said. Her voice was barely audible above the radio. Because I've been watching him watch you, Warren said, since Tuesday. Tuesday. 3 days ago. 3 days. She had gone to work and come home and made dinner and helped Chloe with homework and checked the locks before bed. And for all 3 of those days, there had been a man she did not know watching a man who terrified her. And she had not known any of it. The protection that had been present without her awareness was almost more than she could process standing at a diner counter with a coffee pot in her hand. "What do you want?" she said. It was the most important question. She had learned that people who offered help almost always wanted something back. The only honest thing that she could do with that fact was ask it directly. Warren turned from the window and looked at her. "Nothing," he said. "Your father asked me to look out for you if it ever came to this. I told him I would." A pause. "That's all this is." She studied his face, the scar along the jaw, the stillness in the eyes that had seen things and had not required those things to make sense before accepting that they were real. She was good at reading people. She had needed to be for a long time. And what she read in Warren Grady's face was not comfort exactly, and not warmth in the soft sense. It was something more structural, a load-bearing quality. The kind of presence that doesn't say it will be okay because it has lived long enough to know that isn't a promise anyone can make, but says instead, "I will not leave." And that felt more solid because it was more specific. She believed him. She did not know why. She did not fully trust why, but she believed him. "He's not going to leave on his own," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Warren said, "he's not. He knows about Chloe's school." "Yes. He'll use her." She said it flatly. The flat tone was not absence of emotion. It was the compression of it, the way you reduce a very large thing to make it portable. "He's done it before, not physically, but he uses the threat of her. He thinks it keeps me from—" She stopped. "I know," Warren said. "I've seen the type." She looked at him. "What are you going to do?" Warren set his coffee mug down on the counter with that particular deliberateness she had noticed before. "What needs to be done," he said quietly. And there was something in the way he said it quietly without announcement that she recognized. The preference for invisibility, not from cowardice, but from competence. The understanding that things done without announcement were things done without complications. She felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time. Something she had classified as dangerous and boxed away and refused to look at directly. She felt less alone. Nathan stayed for 2 hours. He ordered more coffee and a piece of cake and sat in the booth with the patience of a man who had decided that waiting was winning, checking his phone occasionally, watching her cross the room, never approaching again. But she knew what it meant every time she felt his eyes land on her back as she moved between tables, every time she came within his sightline, and his hand lifted slightly around his mug as if to remind her he was there. That was the architecture of it. No raised voice, no scene, just presence. Relentless, deliberate, strategic presence. The presence of a man who had done this before and knew exactly how much damage could be done with nothing more than existing in a room. She refilled Chester's coffee. She smiled at a family who came in from the highway and ordered pancakes and talked about Thanksgiving plans. She did all of it with the surface performance of normalcy that she had refined over 2 years into something very close to an art form. The muscles of her face knew how to arrange themselves into an expression that said everything here is ordinary. Her body knew how to move through a room as though the floor beneath it were not a slowly collapsing surface over a very long drop. The silver-haired man Warren was still at the counter. The 3 men at the table behind him were still there, steady, unhurried, waiting in the way of people who know how to wait without it costing them anything. She brought Warren a second refill without asking. He accepted it the same way he accepted everything, with minimal acknowledgement and complete awareness. "He's not here just to talk," Warren said quietly, his eyes on his mug. "No," she said. "He knows where your daughter goes to school. He knows your shift ends at 4. He knows which car is yours." She absorbed each of those facts the way you absorb a series of impacts, not with surprise, but with the grim recognition of something you already knew and were hoping not to confirm. "He's been here long enough to learn all of that," she said. "At least since Monday," Warren said. "Maybe before." Monday. 4 days before she had any idea he was in the state. 4 days of Nathan Vale moving through Ridgeback, Nevada, watching her routines, learning the geography of her life, and she had not noticed a single thing. That failure, not of alertness, but of information, pressed down on her with a weight she would need to process later. Later, when she had the luxury of later. "What are the men at the table?" she asked. Warren's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Closest thing to a smile she had seen from him. "My people," he said. "Deacon, Mick Ruiz. A pause. They've been with me for a long time. They'll stay as long as this takes. And you think it takes however long it takes, he said. That's not a question I'm asking myself. She looked at him. My father sent you. Your father built something, Warren said. We're just a part of it that shows up. She didn't say anything for a moment. She stood at the counter and looked at the ring her coffee pot had left on the laminate sermons. She thought about James Voss sitting at his kitchen table with a serious face teaching a 9-year-old girl to fold her fingers in a specific way, telling her it was a family flag, and all the while understanding without telling her, without being able to explain it because she was 9, and because he was him, that he was building the architecture of her future safety piece by piece in whatever time he had, in whatever form was available to him. He had always been building something. She just hadn't known it was for her. At 1:45 in the afternoon, Nathan stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back at her across the length of the diner, not speaking, just looking with the expression of a man confirming a location, marking a coordinate. Then he walked out. She watched through the window. He crossed the parking lot, got into a dark gray sedan rental plates, and drove out to the highway heading south. He did not look back. Laura let out a breath she had not been aware of holding. Warren stood from the counter and put on his jacket. He moved to the register and paid in cash, exact, no discussion, and then paused and looked at her with that level, load-bearing expression. He didn't leave, Warren said. She frowned. He drove south toward town. The motel on 93 has been closed since October. She heard her own voice making the calculation before she finished the thought. There's a second one, east side of town off the access road. Cash, no ID required. He picked up his jacket from the stool. He's been staying there since Monday, 3 days before she had even known he was in the state. What happens now, she said. Warren looked at the door. My guys are going to do something for the next few hours. Something quiet and necessary. He paused. I need you to finish your shift. Leave at your normal time. Drive your normal route. Pick up your daughter. Go home. Don't change anything. Don't call anyone. Don't deviate from normal. And Chloe, already covered, Warren said. Laura went very still. What does that mean? Means I made a call this morning. Means the school lets out at 3:15 and she will not walk to the curb alone. And she will not be in a situation where that man gets near her. A pause. I'm telling you this as information, not as something you need to verify. I know you're going to want to verify it. I'm asking you to trust me instead. I don't know you, she said. You knew your father, Warren said. That's how you know me. The afternoon stretched on after he left. The other 3 men had gone with him, filing out one at a time in the unhurried way they had come in until the diner was quiet again, and the radio was playing something old and sad, and the wind was moving out on the highway. Danny came through the kitchen door and refilled his own coffee. Weird morning, he said. Yeah, she said. He looked at her for a moment. You want me to call Meredith out? No, she said. I'm fine. She was not fine. But fine was not the point. The point was continuing to function inside a situation that had not resolved. She was good at that. She had been good at that for 2 years. What was different, what was new and difficult to integrate, was the feeling that this time maybe continuing to function was not the only option available to her. Her shift ended at 4. She changed out of her uniform in the small bathroom at the back, hung it on its hook, pulled on her jacket. She looked at her face in the mirror for a moment, really looked in the way she usually avoided. The tiredness was there. The careful set of the eyes, always slightly in motion, even at rest, never fully landing. 2 years of motion in a face that had once been still. But something else was there too. Something she couldn't name yet. Something fractionally different from what she had seen that morning. She picked up her bag and went out to her car. She drove her normal route. She picked up Chloe at 3:15, who came running across the school parking lot with a drawing she had made in art class. A house, a tree, a horse. That might have been a dome rendered in the deliberate, exuberant colors of a child who has not yet learned to be cautious about beauty. Laura held her daughter against her chest for 1 second longer than usual. Mom? Chloe said, muffled against Laura's shoulder. You're squishing me. I know, Laura said. She let go. She drove home. She made dinner. She helped with the homework. She checked the locks before bed. She lay in the dark for a long time, listening to the Nevada wind move across the desert, thinking about a man with silver hair in a load-bearing kind of stillness, who had said her father's name as though it were something he had been carrying carefully for a long time, waiting to set down in the right place. She thought about the signal. 3 fingers, 2 folded. She had raised it in a diner in Nevada, and somewhere 3 years ago, it had already been answered. It had been answered before she raised it because her father had known her well enough and had loved her practically enough to build the answer in advance. To hand it to men he trusted and say she will need this one day. She had needed it today, and it had been there. She was still processing what that meant when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 rings. She answered. "It's Warren," he said. "Sorry to call late." "What is it?" "Nathan made a call tonight, about an hour ago." A pause. "He was talking to someone who knows this area, someone local." She sat up in the dark. "Who?" Warren was quiet for a moment. "That, he said, is what I need to find out by morning." The line went quiet. Laura sat in the dark with her phone in her hand and the sound of the wind outside and the small, sleeping sounds of her daughter through the wall. And she understood with absolute clarity that whatever had begun in that diner today was not ending tonight. It was only beginning. And the men who had walked in and sat down and ordered coffee were still out there in the Nevada dark engines, quiet, watching a road she could not see from her window, carrying a promise that was older than her fear and more patient than the man who had driven 9 days to find her. She lay back down. She did not sleep for a long time, but for the first time in 2 years, the dark felt like it contained something other than danger. Morning came to Ridgeback the way it always did in November, reluctantly, without warmth, dragging light across the desert floor like something being pulled against its will. Laura was already awake, had been awake since 4:30, lying in the dark with her hands flat on the blanket and her mind running the same calculations that had been running since Warren's call. Someone local, someone Nathan had contacted who knew the area. Those 7 words had done something to the architecture of her fear, not enlarged it exactly, but shifted it, changed its shape from the familiar terror of a known threat into something more complicated and therefore more difficult to navigate. Known threats had edges. You could map them. You could prepare. Unknown local contacts were a different problem entirely. She got up at 5, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window with the mug in both hands, and looked at the pre-dawn desert, her car in the driveway. The road in front of the house dark and empty in both directions. She checked the road for 30 seconds. Nothing moved. She drank her coffee and told herself that was good news. She did not entirely believe it. At 6:15, she woke. Chloe made oatmeal, found a missing library book wedged between the mattress and the wall, and drove her daughter to school in a silence that Chloe eventually broke by announcing she had decided to name the class Goldfish Navigator because it looked like it was always trying to figure out where it was going. Laura laughed at that, a real laugh shorter than it should have been, but genuine. Chloe looked at her sideways with that serious expression she wore like weather. "You look tired, Mom." "I'm okay." "You always say that." "I know." Chloe accepted this with the philosophical resignation of a 7-year-old who had learned which answers were real and which ones were placeholders, and they drove the rest of the way to school in the particular companionable quiet of 2 people who understand each other well enough not to require more from the silence. Laura watched her daughter cross the parking lot and disappear through the front entrance. She sat in the car for a long moment. Then she drove to the diner. Warren's bike was already in the parking lot, just his. The others were gone, which meant something, though she wasn't sure yet what. She parked and went in through the back and found him at the counter in the same stool as yesterday. Same posture, same flatness in the eyes, different coffee. He looked like a man who had not slept, which she recognized because she looked the same. He registered her arrival with the slight angle of his head and nothing more. Meredith was behind the counter. She looked from Warren to Laura with an expression that contained several questions she had chosen not to ask yet, then poured Laura a coffee and found somewhere else to be. Laura sat 2 stools down from Warren. "You find out who he called," she said. "Working on it," he said. "That's not an answer." "It's the answer I have." He turned the mug in his hands. "I've got a name. I'm verifying it." "Tell me the name." Warren looked at her. "Roy Caslin." She turned it over in her mind. The name didn't land anywhere familiar. "I don't know it. He's a property manager. Has a few rentals around the valley, couple of commercial spaces. Not a big operation. Warren set the mug down. But he's got a cousin in Henderson who ran a collections business that Nathan used for a while. Collections, she said, not the kind you do with letters and phone calls. No, Warren said, not that kind. She sat with that for a moment. Nathan reaching out to someone local, someone with marginal connections to the kind of men who understood coercion as a practical skill, told her something she had been half expecting to learn, but had hoped not to. He's not just here to talk, she said. No. He came with infrastructure. Warren's jaw moved the slightest tightening. He came with a plan that goes beyond the booth in the diner. He's going to try to move on me, Laura said. Not you, Warren said. And the way he said it, the slight pause before it, the precision of the correction landed in her chest like something cold. She looked at him. Chloe, she said. Warren didn't answer immediately. That was its own answer. He wouldn't hurt her, she started. He wouldn't hurt her, Warren said. That's not what this is. But he knows that's the lever. He's always known that. If he can create a situation where you're reacting to where she is instead of thinking about what you need to do, he controls the tempo. A pause. He's done this before. This isn't his first time using a child as a management tool. The word management applied to her daughter made something shift in Laura's jaw. She put her coffee down before she could register what she was doing with the mug. Before, she said. You said before. What do you know about before? Warren looked at the window. Your father kept records, he said. Things you told him, things he saw when he visited. A pause. Things he was worried about before he got sick. He never told me he was worried, she said. The words came out with an edge she hadn't intended. No, Warren said quietly. He wouldn't. She thought about that. About James Voss, a big quiet man who had never been given to declarations, who had communicated love through presence and action, who had driven 14 hours once to help her move from an apartment without being told why she was moving, who had never mentioned Nathan's name in a tone of alarm, but who had asked her twice in the last year of his life whether she had people around her, whether she had support. She had told him yes, of course she was fine. And he had nodded in that careful way he had and not pushed it. He had been building the answer while she was still insisting the question didn't exist. He told you things, she said, about my life. He told me things he needed someone to know, Warren said. In case he wasn't there. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. What are you planning? Not an outline. The actual plan. Warren turned from the window and looked at her directly, the most sustained eye contact he had offered since she had met him. And she recognized in it an evaluation not of her worthiness, but of her capacity. The specific question of whether she could hold the weight of what he was about to say without it buckling something she needed intact. We're going to document everything, he said. Every move he makes, every contact he has with Caslin or anyone connected to Caslin. Every time he goes near your daughter's school. Every violation of the existing protective order. He paused. You do have one. Utah, she said. But it doesn't. It crosses state lines, he said, and he's crossed them to violate it. That's federal. Another pause. My guy Dex is a paralegal. He's been compiling since Wednesday, before she had even known Nathan was in the state. You were already building a case, she said. We were already protecting you, Warren said. The case is how we make it stick. She turned this over, looked at it from multiple angles. The part of her that had spent 2 years making every decision alone, the part that had trained itself to trust no one's assessment of a situation except her own, pushed back against it. Instinctively. Not because she doubted Warren. Exactly. Because trusting a plan you didn't create was its own kind of vulnerability. And vulnerability was something she had been managing very carefully for a long time. What if Caslin moves before you've got enough, she said. That's what the other guys are for, Warren said. Deacon's on the East Access Road. Caslin's rental property sits at the end of it. Mick and Ruiz are running a rotation between the school and your house. The school and her house. Covered as Warren had told her last night. She thought about Mick, the compact one with the tattoo, repositioning himself in the diner yesterday without her noticing. The quiet efficiency of it. The infrastructure that had been in place around her life without her awareness. Part of her was grateful. Part of her was unsettled in a way she needed to sit with. I don't like not knowing what's happening around me, she said. I know. I need you to keep me informed, everything. That's reasonable, he said, and I will. But there are going to be moments where I need you to move without full information, and I need to know that you can do that. She looked at him. What does that mean exactly? It means if I text you a single word and that word is now, I need you to get your daughter and go to a location I'm going to give you. And I need you to do it without waiting for an explanation. Where is that location? Warren reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and set a folded piece of paper on the counter between them. She looked at it without picking it up. There's an address, he said, a house outside of town. Belongs to a woman named Vera. She's a retired nurse. She's got 3 dogs and no patience for nonsense, and she will keep you and Chloe safe for as long as necessary. He paused. She also knew your father. Laura picked up the paper, unfolded it, read the address, folded it again and tucked it into her apron pocket. I'll memorize it, she said, and burn this. Warren looked at her with an expression that was as close to something warm as she had seen on his face. Yeah, he said. James raised you right. The morning rush came and went. Nathan did not appear. That fact, his absence was almost harder to manage than his presence would have been. Presence was information. You could read a man, you could see. Absence was a different calculation, a set of possibilities fanning out in every direction, each one requiring energy to evaluate and discard. She moved through tables and refills and order calls with the surface stillness she had trained herself to project. But underneath it, her mind was doing the kind of work that burned through a person, the sustained vigilance of an animal that has been taught to expect a predator and has not yet been shown where it is. At 10:40, her phone buzzed in her apron. Unknown number different from last night's. She stepped into the back hallway and answered. Silence for a moment. Then Laura, Nathan's voice. She said nothing. I saw your friends, he said. There was something in his tone she couldn't quite locate, not anger, not quite amusement, something more careful than either. The bikers, interesting choice. She kept her face very still even though no one was watching. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Yet you do. A pause. I'm not here to fight, Laura. I've never wanted to fight with you. You know that. I just want to have a conversation without backup, without whatever arrangement you've made with these guys. His voice was measured reasonable, the verbal equivalent of hands raised in non-threatening openness. Chloe deserves to know her. Don't, she said. The word came out quiet and precise, and he stopped. Don't use her name in a sentence about what she deserves. You don't get to do that. A pause. You've gotten harder, he said. It didn't sound entirely like a complaint. I've gotten smarter, she said. There's a difference. She ended the call. Her hand was steady. She registered that fact as information about herself. 2 years ago, ending that call would have cost her the next hour of function hands, shaking mind, spiraling into a review of every possible consequence. Now she put the phone in her apron pocket and went back out to the counter and poured a refill for Chester, who was on his 3rd read-through of the same newspaper and noticed nothing unusual. The steadiness in her hands was something she did not allow herself to feel proud of, because that was not the moment for it, but she noted it. At noon, Warren came back. He had been gone since mid-morning, and when he walked in, he had a quality about him she had not seen yesterday. Something tighter in the jaw. Something that was not quite controlled, which on a face as controlled as his was significant. He sat at the counter. She brought him coffee without being asked. She stood across from him and waited. Caslin met with Nathan this morning, he said. 7 a.m. parking lot of the gas station on 93. You have eyes on Caslin. Had, he paused. Deacon had to pull back. So you lost the surveillance temporarily. Warren's jaw moved. It means Nathan knows we're running observation. He was careful coming in here yesterday, the call this morning. He looked at her. That's him adjusting. He's smart. I know he's smart, she said. The flatness in her voice was not toward Warren. He received it that way as information, not as accusation. What did he want? Warren asked. The call. To meet. Without you. She paused. He used Chloe. Warren's expression did not change visibly, but something in the set of his shoulders shifted fractionally. The way a structure shifts when additional weight is applied to a particular point. What else? He said. That's all he got through before I hung up. She looked at him. Warren, he filed a motion 3 months ago in Utah. Warren looked at her steadily. I know. She stared at him. You know. Dex found it Wednesday night. He's claiming an implied custody arrangement based on duration of cohabitation and financial contribution to Chloe's upbringing. There is no custody arrangement. We were never. I know what the record shows, Warren said. He knows what it shows too. That's not the point. The point is the paperwork exists. It's in the system. And if you run, he stopped. She felt the ground shift beneath her. Not suddenly the way a hillside shifts in slow rain. Incrementally, one unstable inch at a time. If I run, she said slowly, it looks like I'm hiding from a legitimate custody dispute. And the restraining order starts to look like obstruction rather than protection, Warren said. Yes, she understood now. The whole architecture of it. Not just a man who couldn't let go, a man who had turned his inability to let go into a system. With legal cover, with local infrastructure, with parallel tracks running simultaneously. She had spent 2 years running from his emotion. What she had actually been running from was his methodology. He's been building this for months, she said. Longer, Warren said. Dex thinks the legal strategy started forming the moment you left Utah, possibly before. Then we can't just wait for him to make a move. No, Warren agreed. Oh, we can't, and we need to build faster than he does. He leaned forward, slightly dropping his voice. The evidence we're compiling, the interstate violation, the contact with Caslin, the pattern of surveillance, it needs to be in front of the right people before he files anything else, before he creates an incident. A pause. I have a contact. Sheriff's Department, 2 counties over. She's the kind of person who doesn't need the picture painted twice. A cop, Laura said. A person, Warren said, with enough precision to communicate that the distinction mattered. She almost smiled. Almost. When she asked, tomorrow morning if Dex finishes tonight. She nodded. The afternoon came apart in pieces. Warren left at 1. The diner cycled through its midday rhythms. Laura moved through all of it with the automated precision of muscle memory, the front of her mind occupied with the surface logistics of the job, while the back of it turned over everything Warren had told her. The legal filing, the parallel track, the possibility that everything she had done to protect herself and Chloe, the running the relocation, the careful erasure of every social and digital footprint could be reframed as evidence of instability, of obstruction, of a woman making it difficult for a concerned partner to maintain contact with a child he had financial ties to. She had thought she was staying ahead of him. She had been running on the surface of something much deeper. At 2:45, Meredith found her in the back hallway. Someone's asking about you, Meredith said. Her voice was level, but she had the hands in pockets posture of someone delivering unwelcome information carefully. Out front at the register. Man I haven't seen before. Describe him. 50s, heavy, wearing a work jacket, contractor type. Meredith paused. He said he was looking for a woman named Ellen Morris. The name landed wrong. Ellen Morris was a name Laura had used for 4 months in Utah. A partial cover used for utilities and a gym membership and nothing else. Not for the diner, not for the school, not for anything in Ridgeback. Nathan knew she was here. Nathan knew her actual name, which meant someone who knew the Ellen Morris identity had sent this man, which meant the Utah connection was wider than she had known. I'll handle it, Laura said. Meredith put a hand on her arm. Laura, she stopped. Meredith was a perceptive woman, and she had kept her perceptions to herself for 14 months. The hand on her arm was the first time in all of that she had made the choice to close the distance. I see more than you think I see, Meredith said quietly. Whatever's happening, you don't have to be invisible about it in here. Laura looked at her. Thank you, she said and meant it. She went out front. The man at the register was heavy-set 50s, wearing a jacket from a work supply store. He had a face that had been pleasant once and had settled into something less specific over time. He was holding a folded piece of paper in a way that suggested he had been instructed what to do with it, but not told what was in it. Can I help you, Laura said. He looked at her, something shifted in his face recognition, which was wrong because he had never seen her, which meant he had been given a photograph. I'm looking for, he started. I heard, she said, and there's no one here by that name. I was told, you were told something that was true somewhere else and isn't true here. She kept her voice even. If someone sent you here with information about this diner, that information was bad. I'm sorry you made the trip. He stood there for a moment, turned the folded paper over in his hands. He wasn't threatening. He was confused, which was actually more useful. A confused man didn't escalate. He recalibrated. Okay, he said finally. Sorry to bother you. He left. Laura watched him cross the parking lot and get into a pickup truck with a magnetic contractor's logo on the door and drive out to the highway heading north. She went to the bathroom, locked the door, took out her phone and called Warren. He answered on the second ring. Man just came into the diner, she said, looking for Ellen Morris. A pause. Where'd he go? North on 93, pickup truck, contractor logo. She described it. Got it. There was a change in the quality of his voice, the same shift she had noticed in his shoulders at the counter. Something tighter, something operating closer to its actual edge. He's trying to confirm the location, building the picture. He already has a photograph of me, she said. Laura, Warren's voice dropped. I need you to listen to me. I'm listening. Nathan made a second call this morning after the meeting with Caslin. Dex caught it on the number trace. A pause. He's not just running a custody play. He called someone in family services, filed a welfare concern for Chloe. Anonymous tip, but Dex has the callback number. It traces back to a burner purchased in Utah. The ground shifted again, further this time. He's bringing family services in, she said. An anonymous welfare concern initiates an automatic investigation, Warren said. It means someone shows up at the school. It means you get flagged. And if you're flagged and you have no fixed address history and no community ties, and you're documented as having fled a state, it makes me look like the problem, she said. It makes you look like a woman hiding something, Warren said, which from the outside, without context, is exactly what it looks like. She stood in the bathroom with the phone at her ear and the fluorescent light buzzing above the mirror and her own face looking back at her with the expression of someone who has just understood something that changes the nature of everything before and after it. He planned this, she said, before he even drove here. He filed the welfare concern before he walked into my diner. Yes, Warren said. He walked in so I would see him, she said. He wanted me scared and reactive. He wanted me to... She stopped. Understood. He wanted me to run. If you run, Warren said, the welfare investigator shows up at the school and you're not there. Chloe's not there, and a woman who disappeared with a child in the middle of an open welfare investigation. Looks like something very different from a mother protecting her daughter, she said. The bathroom was very quiet, just the buzzing of the fluorescent light, her own breath. He played me, she said. He tried to, Warren said. He did not know about the signal. He did not know about me. A pause, and he still doesn't know everything I know. What do you know that he doesn't? Warren was quiet for a moment. The welfare investigator assigned to the tip, he said, went to school with Deacon's sister, and Deacon made a phone call this morning. She let that sit. You're operating on a lot of levels, she said. This is what we do, he said simply. This is what your father asked us to do. She looked at her own reflection. The tired eyes, the set of the jaw, the woman in the mirror who had been running for 2 years and was now for the first time being asked to stop running and do something harder. Stand still. Let it come. Trust that there were people around her who had already positioned themselves for exactly this. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay, I'm staying, she said. I'm not running, not tonight, not tomorrow, not when the investigator shows up. A pause. Tell Dex to finish the file. He'll be done by midnight, Warren said. Good, she exhaled. Warren. Yeah, the man my father was, she said. I didn't know he had people like you. I didn't know that was part of his life. She paused. I wish he'd told me. A long silence. He wanted to, Warren said, and something in his voice had shifted something that had been sitting behind the load-bearing stillness and was now briefly visible. He talked about it toward the end. Kept saying he was going to sit you down and explain the whole thing. Another pause. He ran out of time. I know, she said. I know he did. She ended the call, washed her face, unlocked the door, went back out and finished her shift. At 4, she drove to the school and picked up Chloe, drove home, made dinner, helped with homework, checked the locks, and she was doing all of it, performing the ordinary evening, when headlights swept across her living room window at 9:47. A vehicle moving too slowly for a passing car. She went to the window and looked out. A dark sedan sitting at the end of her block. Running. Not parked running. She watched it for 30 seconds. 45. 1 minute. It did not move. She picked up her phone and called Warren. He answered before the first ring completed. I see it, he said. You're watching my street. Mick is. How long has that car been there? 3 minutes before you called, he said. It came from the direction of the motel. She looked at the window, at the sedan, at the running lights in the cold Nevada dark. Is he in it? A pause. Someone is, Warren said. And then Laura, the file Dex has been building. His voice had changed, had taken on the quality she had been cataloging all day. Tighter, operating closer to its edge. He found something tonight. Something that wasn't in what your father told me. What? Nathan's done this before, Warren said. Not just with you. There was a woman in Colorado, 8 years ago. Different name, different situation, same methodology. A pause. She didn't make it out. The sentence landed in the silence of her living room like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples moving outward in every direction at once. What do you mean she didn't make it out? She said, though she already knew. It was ruled accidental, Warren said. Dex thinks it wasn't. Laura stood at her living room window with the phone pressed to her ear, and the cold Nevada dark pressing back from the other side of the glass, and the sedan still sitting at the end of her block with its running lights on. And she felt something she had not felt in 2 years, something that was beyond fear. On the other side of it, in the territory that opens up when fear has been fully processed, and what remains is something colder and more functional. Clarity. What was her name? Laura said. Mara Doyle, Warren said. Colorado Springs, 2016. How did it happen? A pause. Warren choosing his words carefully. She fell, he said, from the exterior staircase of the apartment building she was living in. Nathan had been documented at her building twice in the 3 weeks before it happened. The investigation found no evidence of third-party involvement. The case stayed accidental. Another pause. But Dex found a pattern of financial transfers in the 18 months prior. Nathan sending money to an account connected to a man in Denver. 2 prior assault convictions. The timing was irregular, small amounts spaced out, nothing that would flag. The account went dormant 4 days after Mara Doyle died. The sedan had not moved. Laura looked at it and thought about a woman she had never met who had fallen from a staircase in Colorado Springs and been ruled accidental. And she thought about the 8 years between that staircase and this window. And she thought about how long Nathan had been running this particular version of himself, patient, methodical, legally sophisticated, and willing to go further than anyone around him had believed. He paid someone, she said. We believe so, Warren said. We can't prove it. Dex has the transfer records, but the link between the Denver account and the actual event is circumstantial. It's the kind of thing that tells you what you need to know without giving you what you need to prove it. The sheriff's contact, she said, tomorrow morning. Yes, Dex needs to have everything including Mara Doyle. He knows. She kept watching the sedan. The running lights were a dull amber through the glass, distorted by the moisture that had collected on the window surface. Warren, she said, still here. If the welfare investigator shows up at Chloe's school tomorrow and I'm not there, she said, and the sheriff's meeting doesn't happen first. I know, he said. We're moving the meeting to 6 a.m. Dex is driving through the night. She processed this. The paralegal was driving through the Nevada night to get a file to a sheriff's contact by 6 in the morning, so that a welfare investigation triggered by an anonymous tip from a man who might have had a woman killed in 2016 didn't pull her daughter out of class. Okay, she said. The sedan, Warren said. I need you to go to your bedroom, close the curtains, and not look at it again tonight. Let Mick watch it. Go get some sleep, because tomorrow is going to require all of you. She pulled the curtain across the window. She did not sleep. She lay in the dark with her daughter's breathing audible through the thin wall between their rooms, the slow, trusting rhythm of a child who did not know that a car was sitting at the end of her street. And she stared at the ceiling and ran through everything she knew about Nathan Vale and forced herself to acknowledge that what she had believed she understood about the threat he represented had been wrong, not partially wrong, fundamentally wrong. She had been operating with an incomplete picture. And the difference between the picture she'd had and the picture she had now was the difference between a man she needed to stay ahead of and a man she needed to stop. Those were different problems. She understood them differently at 5 in the morning than she had understood them at midnight. At 5:30, she was dressed. At 5:45, Chloe was awake, slightly resentful of the early hour, but eating cereal without protest while Laura moved through the kitchen with a quietness that was different from her usual morning quietness. More deliberate, more final feeling. The quietness of someone making sure nothing is left undone. She texted Dolores, "Can you do the school run this morning?" Something came up at work. Dolores's response was immediate considering the hour. "Already up. I'll be there at 7:15. Laura looked at her daughter over the kitchen counter. Chloe was reading the back of the cereal box, which she did every morning, as though new information might have appeared since yesterday. "Mom," Chloe said without looking up, "did you know that oats were used as currency in ancient Scotland?" "I didn't," Laura said. "We should move to ancient Scotland. It would be a long drive." Chloe considered this seriously. "We could take the scenic route." Laura watched her daughter for a moment, the serious face, the cereal box, the unremarkable, perfect, ordinary morning of it, and felt something move through her chest that she did not allow herself to name. Dolores arrived at 7:15 exactly. Laura kissed Chloe at the door and watched the car pull out of the driveway and turn toward the school. The sedan from last night was gone. She stood in the open doorway for a moment, looking at the empty spot where it had been parked. The absence of it was not reassuring. Nathan's absence was never reassuring. Her phone buzzed. "Warren, meeting's done. Drive to the diner. Come alone." She got in her car. All four of them were there when she walked in. Warren at the counter, Deacon, the large one with the limp in the booth farthest from the windows, Mick at a table near the door with a coffee he wasn't drinking, and a fourth man she had seen but not been introduced to, compact 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a laptop bag on the seat beside him. Dex. Meredith looked at the group assembled in her diner, made the same quiet decision she had apparently been making since this started, and disappeared into the kitchen with a discretion that Laura noted and was grateful for. She sat at the counter next to Warren. "The meeting," she said. "The compound." "Done," Warren said. "Detective Raines, she's our contact, has the full file. The Colorado material, the interstate violation, the Caslin connection, the welfare tip. Trace." He paused. "She's not going to move on it today. She needs 48 hours to route it through the right channels without it looking like it came from us." 48 hours, Laura said, "to do it correctly." "The welfare investigator," she said. "Not coming today," Dex said from the booth. His voice was clipped, precise. The voice of a man who delivered information in the smallest useful unit and waited for questions. Deacon's contact slowed the assignment process. "You've got until Thursday before anyone knocks on a door." Thursday. Today was Wednesday. She looked at Dex. "The Colorado woman, Mara Doyle. What exactly does the file show?" Dex pulled the laptop onto the table and opened it. Transfer records from 3 accounts Nathan controlled between 2014 and 2016. Irregular deposits to a holding account in Denver. Total value $19,000 over 18 months. Account registered to a man named Carl Eichmann. 2 prior assault convictions, 1 plea bargain, battery charge. He paused. Mara Doyle had a protective order against Nathan at the time of her death, in effect for 4 months. He appeared at her building 4 more times after the order was filed. Each time she called it in, each time the responding officer documented it as a civil matter with insufficient grounds for arrest. He took his glasses down from his forehead and looked at her over them. The last documented appearance was 11 days before she died. Laura sat with this. The protective order as provocation, a boundary that when crossed repeatedly without consequence became evidence of the system's indifference and therefore a source of power for the person crossing it. Each time Nathan appeared and nothing happened to him, the order became less a protection and more a demonstration of its own failure. He had learned from that, spent 8 years refining the methodology. "He's been practicing," she said. Nobody at the table said anything, which was its own kind of confirmation. Mick shifted in his seat by the door. He had been watching the parking lot since she had come in, and he moved now with the barely perceptible tension of a man who has seen something that requires processing. "Warren," he said. His voice was quiet and carried no particular alarm, which was exactly what made it alarming. She had been around these men for less than 48 hours and had already learned that their absence of obvious alarm was not the same as the absence of a problem. It was the containment of one. Warren turned. Mick jerked his chin toward the window. Laura looked. The parking lot empty except for their bikes and two regular cars and a truck she didn't recognize. Late model dark blue sitting at the far edge of the lot where the gravel transitioned to the dirt strip along the highway shoulder. The truck hadn't been there when she pulled in. Caslin, Mick said. Ost. Warren stood from the counter without rushing. He moved to the window and stood beside it, not in front of it, beside it, at an angle that allowed him to see out without being easily visible from outside, and looked at the truck for a count of 5. Yeah, he said. He's alone, Deacon said from the booth. Far as I can see. Deacon stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate and carried the weight of a very large man who had learned a long time ago that deliberate was better than fast. When he stood to his full height in the low morning light, he occupied the room differently than most men occupied rooms. I'll talk to him, Deacon said. No, Warren said. Deacon looked at him. Not here, Warren said. Not with her here. Deacon looked at Laura. Something moved across his face, not quite apology, not quite acknowledgement. Something that incorporated both without being either. Then we need to move her, he said. I'm not going anywhere, Laura said. Both men looked at her. Caslin showing up here means Nathan knows I'm here, she said. If I leave, he knows I left. He knows I was scared enough to move, and we already established that that's what he wants. She looked at Warren. You said 48 hours. I'm staying in my routine. I'm working my shift. Warren studied her. Caslin might not be alone. Is there a vehicle you can't account for? A pause. Not currently. Then I'm staying, she said. The truck sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. Laura counted them. She poured coffee for the 2 truckers who came in at 7:45. She took orders for a family of 4 in the window booth. She moved through the ordinary mechanics of the morning with Caslin's truck sitting 40 yards away like a held breath. At the 11-minute mark, it had left pulled out of the lot onto the highway, heading east unhurried. Deacon, who had moved outside without Laura noticing, came back in through the front door at the 12-minute mark and returned to his booth and looked at Warren and gave a small head shake. Whatever he had observed had not alarmed him enough to change his expression, which Laura was learning to read as a specific data point. The morning settled briefly, tentatively, in the way that a situation without resolution can appear settled from the outside while remaining entirely active underneath. Warren pulled his stool closer to the counter. I need to tell you something about the Ironbound, he said. She looked at him. The chapter your father rode with, he said. We've been quiet for about 4 years. After James died, after some other things happened, we stepped back. He paused. There are people who know that, people who paid attention to who we were and when we stopped being visible. Nathan, she said. Not Nathan. Nathan found you on his own. But Caslin, Warren stopped, looked at his coffee mug. Caslin has been involved in a dispute with a former member of a different chapter for about 2 years. Old argument about territory and a piece of property. And that member, he stopped again. Laura waited. His name is Garrett Tier, Warren said finally. He left the Ironbound 7 years ago under bad circumstances. Theft from the chapter. He and James had a serious falling out before James died. A pause. We've had eyes on High for about 2 years because of the Caslin connection. And because High has a pattern of selling information about people in exchange for arrangements with local operators. She could see where this was going. She could see it arriving from a long way off, the way you can see weather over open desert. He told Caslin about the Ironbound, she said. First, Warren said, he told Nathan. The sound of the kitchen, the radio, the distant highway. Nathan knows who you are, Laura said. He knew about you before he walked in here. We believe so, Warren said. We believe High made contact with Nathan somewhere in the last month. Provided information about me, about Deacon, about Mick and Ruiz. Chapter history. He paused, wishfully including the promise I made to your father. The full architecture of it landed all at once. Nathan had not walked into the diner simply to be seen by Laura. He had walked in to be seen by Warren to confirm that the Ironbound was active and in place, which meant High's information had been accurate, which meant the rest of High's information about Warren's methods, about the chapter's capacity, about its weaknesses, was presumably also accurate. He walked in to assess you, she said. Warren's jaw tightened. The slightest thing. Yes, he said. What does High know that's dangerous? Warren was quiet for a moment that lasted slightly too long. Deacon, he said, his history. Laura looked at the big man in the far booth. Deacon was looking at the table, his large hands flat on its surface. The thing she had read in him as deliberateness, she now read differently. Not the deliberateness of a patient man, but the stillness of a man holding something in place. "What about Deacon?" she said. Warren lowered his voice further. "Deacon spent 4 years in federal custody," he said. "Finished his sentence 6 years ago, clean since, but the circumstances of the original charge—" He stopped. There was a civil suit connected to it, from the family of a man who was hurt. The suit was settled, sealed, but High was present for parts of that situation and knows what happened. If that information reaches the wrong people, if it reaches Raines before we've established the right context," Warren said, "it changes how our file looks. It looks like a group of men with histories using a vulnerable woman's situation to settle a score with someone connected to their former associate." He looked at her. "It makes us the problem." She sat with the full weight of this. They had built a file. They had moved carefully, legally, methodically. They had 48 hours and a contact at the sheriff's department and a paralegal who had driven through the night. And all of it, the whole architecture, could be dismantled by a man named High selling information to the right person at the wrong moment. "Where is High now?" she said. "That," Warren said, "is what I've been trying to find out since 4 this morning." She got up from the stool, walked to the back hallway, stood very still for a count of 3, with her hand against the tile and her eyes closed. When she came back, she sat down and looked at Warren directly. "What do you need from me?" she said. He looked at her steadily. "Nothing yet." "That's not an answer." "It's the honest one." She looked at Dex. "What connects High to Caslin practically? What's the actual relationship?" Dex considered for a moment. "Property dispute. A parcel of land east of town that High claims he has a verbal agreement to purchase from an estate. Caslin manages the estate. It's an ongoing disagreement about the terms." "Which means High needs Caslin," she said. "At the moment," Dex said. Yes. "And Caslin was here this morning," she said. "Watching, reporting back." She looked at Mick. That's what this morning was. The truck in the lot. Caslin confirming we're still here, still assembled. "Reporting back to High," Mick said. "Or to Nathan through High." "A network," she said quietly. Nathan had not simply driven 9 days and arrived with anger. He had arrived with a network, with positions already held, with information already gathered with a local operator and a disaffected former chapter member, and a legal filing already in motion. He had been building this the way he built everything, methodically, patiently, and she and Warren had 48 hours to build faster. The thought settled into her chest, not as defeat, but as the specific weight of something that had become clear. She was done waiting to understand the shape of what she was facing. She understood it now, all of it, and understanding it, even the parts that frightened her, was the first thing that had felt like solid ground in 2 years. She looked at Warren. "Then let's get to work," she said. He looked back at her, the load-bearing expression, the scarred jaw, the eyes that had seen things and absorbed them without requiring them to make sense first. And he gave her the slight nod of a man who has just confirmed something he was hoping to find. "Yeah," Warren said, "let's." They worked through the rest of the morning at the counter, the 4 of them. Warren, Dex, Laura, and Mick cycling in and out from the door, moving through the information the way you move through a structure you're trying to understand before it collapses on you. Dex had his laptop open and his glasses down and spoke in the clipped, precise shorthand of a man who had learned that the fastest way through complex information was to strip every unnecessary word from it. Warren listened more than he spoke. Mick watched the parking lot, and Laura asked questions, specific, direct, the kind of questions that came from 2 years of learning which details mattered and which ones were noise. The Caslin connection first. Roy Caslin managed 11 rental properties in the valley, 2 commercial spaces, and 1 undeveloped parcel currently in dispute with Garrett High. His cousin in Henderson, a man named Denise Brule, had run a collections operation for 4 years before the business was dissolved following a civil judgment. Nathan had used Brule's services twice, both times in Utah, both times in connection with recovering property from individuals who owed him money. The language in the civil records was careful. The reality, Dex said without elaboration, was not. "So Nathan found Caslin through Brule," Laura said. "Through the Henderson connection, but that's how we read it," Dex said, "and Caslin introduced him to High. Or High found Nathan independently through the ironbound information, and Caslin was the local anchor," Warren said. "We don't know the sequence yet." Does the sequence matter right now? Warren thought about it. Not for Rains, he said. For Rains, what matters is the documented behavior. The interstate violation, the welfare tip, the Caslin meeting on camera at the gas station. He paused. High is a separate problem. High is the problem that can undo everything else, Laura said. Yes, she looked at Dex. Is there anything into the transfer records that connects High directly? Anything that ties him to the Nathan Caslin network financially? Dex pulled the laptop closer. His fingers moved across the keyboard for 30 seconds, the efficient minimal keystrokes of someone who knew exactly where to look. Not directly, he said, but he turned the laptop slightly so she could see the screen. There's a payment from Caslin's property management account 11 days ago to a contractor listed as G. Highland Services. Laura looked at it. G. Highland. High's middle name is Highland, Warren said. It's his mother's maiden name. He's used it before as a business alias. So Caslin paid High 11 days ago, she said, before Nathan arrived, before any of this was visible. Before you knew any of it was visible, Warren said. The distinction landed with weight. 11 days ago, she had been working her shift and driving Chloe to school and checking the locks before bed and believing with the particular exhausted faith of a woman who had been careful for a very long time that careful was enough. And 11 days ago, 3 men she had never met were already coordinating around her life. 2 of them to dismantle it. One of them sitting next to her at a diner counter with cold coffee and older scars to hold it together. She thought about her father, about the specific kind of love that builds instead of declares. She thought about it and then she set it aside because the morning was not done with her yet. At 11:15, Meredith came out from the kitchen and stood at the counter with an expression that had moved beyond careful into something more direct. I need to talk to you, Meredith said to Laura. Outside, Laura said. They went out the back door into the narrow space between the diner and the auto shop. The cold was immediate. Meredith had her arms crossed against it and her chin slightly down in the posture of a woman delivering something she has been holding for too long. Someone called this morning, Meredith said, before you came in, on the diner's landline, asked for you by name. Your actual name. She paused. He said if you cooperated with the meeting today, just you alone, he would speak to the person who filed the welfare concern on your daughter and have it withdrawn before anyone acted on it. Nathan. Offering to make the welfare concern disappear in exchange for a meeting. Just the 2 of them. No Warren, no Mick, no Ironbound. The offer was elegant, and she understood it immediately and completely. It used the thing she was most afraid of, the welfare investigation, the possibility of institutional interference with Chloe as both lever and carrot simultaneously. Come to the meeting and the threat disappears. Don't come. And she had 48 hours before an investigator showed up. And if she came to the meeting alone away from Warren and the others, she thought about Mara Doyle, about an exterior staircase in Colorado Springs, about a case ruled accidental. Thank you, she said to Meredith, for telling me privately. Meredith looked at her for a moment. Are you going? No, Laura said. I'm not. Meredith nodded once. Something in her shoulders settled, not relief exactly, but the particular release of a woman who had been prepared to argue and has just been spared the necessity. Good, she said. They went back inside. Laura did not tell Warren about the call immediately. She told herself she was waiting for the right moment. She moved through the next 2 hours with the information sitting in her chest like something she was deciding the weight of. The call was a data point. It told her things about Nathan's state. His willingness to negotiate or to perform the appearance of negotiation meant something about the state of his confidence. The use of the welfare concern as a bargaining chip meant he didn't intend to let it disappear permanently. He intended to use the threat of it cyclically, withdrawing and redeploying it to manage her behavior. That was the mechanism. She needed to understand the mechanism before she decided what to do with it. She was thinking about this when Ruiz came in. She had not met Ruiz yet. He had been part of the rotation Warren had described the school, the house, and had not come to the diner since the first morning. He was the youngest of the 4 mid-30s, with a face that moved more than the others' faces. More expression visible, less carefully edited. He came through the door and looked at Warren, and something in that look made every person in the room recalibrate without any of them appearing to move. Where? Warren said. School, Ruiz said. The single word dropped into the diner like a stone. Laura was moving before she processed the decision to move. Warren caught her arm, not hard, not Nathan's grip, but present enough to stop her. Tell me, Warren said to Ruiz. Nathan's in a car across from the school, Ruiz said. He's been there for 40 minutes. He hasn't gotten out. A pause. He's just sitting there. Chloe, Laura started, is in class, Ruiz said, looking at her directly. I verified with the office. She's in class. The building is secure. Nobody unauthorized has approached. He's not going in, Warren said. Not a question. No, Ruiz said. He's being visible. He wants someone to see him there and report back. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Not Nathan's different. A text. Your daughter's school has a nice playground. Southeast corner. I can see it from here. Her vision went briefly white at the edges. Not from fear, from something much older and more fundamental than fear. She showed Warren the phone. He read it. His expression did not change, but his stillness changed quality. Became the kind of stillness that occurs in the moment before movement, not the stillness of waiting, the stillness of things already in motion. Get her out of the school, Laura said. Her voice was very quiet. Get my daughter out of the school right now. Ruiz, Warren said. Ruiz was already on his phone. Not the front entrance, Warren said. Side exit, the custodian's door. I know, Ruiz said. He was already moving for the door. Laura turned to Warren. He just changed this. Yes, Warren said. He crossed a line he can't uncross. Her voice was still quiet, but it had changed. The compression that had held the emotion in place for 3 years, for 2 years of running, for all of it had altered its character. Was not lessening, was converting into something more useful. Whatever we were building in 48 hours, she said, we're not waiting 48 hours. Laura? He sent me a text about my daughter's playground, Warren. She looked at him. We are not waiting 48 hours. Warren looked at her. In the 7 seconds of silence that followed, she watched him run the calculation. Watched the load-bearing quality of him absorb this new input and reconfigure around it. Dex, Warren said. Dex looked up. What do we have that we can move on right now without waiting for Rain's process? Dex pulled the laptop closer. The interstate violation is documented and clean. The Caslin meeting, I have Deacon's photos of the vehicle in our lot. The transfer records for the Denver account. He paused. And the text she just received from an unknown number constitutes direct evidence of contact made in violation of the Utah order documenting his awareness of the child's specific location. Is that enough to get Rains moving today? Warren said. Dex tilted his head. It's enough to get her moving. Whether she can get a warrant issued before end of business, he paused. It's possible. Call her, Warren said. Dex was already dialing. Warren turned to Laura. Ruiz is getting Chloe out of the school. He's going to take her to Vera's, the address I gave you. I memorized it, she said. Deacon is already positioning between the school and Nathan's vehicle. Nathan won't see him until he's supposed to. And Hi, she said. We still don't know where Hi is. No, Warren said. And there was something in that single syllable, the honest weight of an incomplete answer from a man not accustomed to incomplete answers, that told her everything he had not said directly. Hi was the variable they couldn't see. The card in play whose location they didn't know, whose next move they couldn't predict. Who was potentially feeding information to Nathan in real time about everything Warren was doing. Which meant Nathan might already know about Dex's call to Rains. Which meant the 48-hour window might already be closed. Her phone rang. Ruiz, she answered. She's out, he said. I've got her. She's good. She thinks it's an early pickup. She's fine. The relief was physical, an actual physical sensation, the loosening of something that had been bracing in her chest since the text arrived. Where are you? Heading to Vera's. She's asking about Navigator. The goldfish. Laura closed her eyes for a second. Tell her Navigator is fine. Tell her I'll see her soon. Copy, Ruiz said and ended the call. She put the phone down on the counter and looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Warren. Nathan is still sitting across from that school, she said. He knows Chloe is already gone. When he figures out she's not there anymore, what does he do? He escalates, Warren said. He escalates, she agreed. He's been building to something. We've been assuming it's the legal track, the welfare investigation, the slow pressure campaign. But that text, she looked at Warren. That text wasn't legal strategy. That was something else. Intimidation, Mick said from his table. Or it was a test, Deacon said from the booth. He had been quiet for most of the morning, and his voice now carried the quality of something considered at length before being offered. To see how we respond when he moves toward the kid, to see what we do, whether we panic, whether we pull resources from one position to cover another. They were all looking at Deacon now. He's been watching us for 2 days, Deacon said. He knows how we're positioned. He sent Caslin here this morning to confirm where we were. He sent that text to see what we do. The large man's hands were flat on the table. He's looking for the gap. Warren turned this over slowly. If we pulled Ruiz from the school rotation to extract Chloe, he said, then the school rotation is currently unmanned. And if Caslin or High was watching the school, Deacon said, they saw Ruiz leave. And they know there's a gap, Warren said. The implications organized themselves in the silence of the diner. Nathan's still in his car across from the school. No Ruiz at the school. Nathan knowing there was no Ruiz at the school. Nathan knowing Chloe had been moved. He's not going to the school, Laura said. Everyone looked at her. He doesn't want Chloe, she said. He wants me to think he wants Chloe. He wants me running toward her. She looked at Warren. Where is he actually going? Warren's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His expression did something she had not seen it do before. Not a change exactly, but a fracture. A hairline crack in the load-bearing quality of it. A moment where the weight exceeded the structure by precisely enough to show. He held the screen so she could see it. A message from a number she didn't recognize. 4 words Highs at the diner. She turned to the front window. A man she had never seen was standing in the parking lot looking directly at the diner entrance, with the unhurried posture of a man who has decided he is done waiting. 50s lean wearing a riding jacket, with a face that had the quality of someone who had been living outside the consequences of his actions long enough that he had begun to believe there weren't any. And standing at the diner's entrance, blocking his path inside, was Meredith Calloway, who had come around from behind the counter and was now at her own front door with her arms crossed and an expression on her face that contained about 40 years of tolerance that had fully run out. "You're not coming in here," Meredith said, clearly audible through the glass. High looked at her. "Lady," he said, "you don't know what you're involved in." "I know exactly what I'm involved in," Meredith said. "I've been involved in it for 14 months, and I have had just about enough of it." She looked at him with the steady, uncomplicated directness of a woman who owned the ground she was standing on. "This is my diner. That's my employee, and you're not coming through this door." High looked past her through the glass and found Warren. The two men looked at each other through a pane of glass and 15 years of severed history. What passed between them in that look was not something Laura could fully read, but she could read the shape of it, the outline of something old and unresolved being confirmed on both sides. High reached into his jacket. Warren was already moving and Mick was already moving, and what High pulled out was not a weapon, but a phone which he turned to face the glass. An image on the screen that Laura couldn't make out from across the room, but that made Warren stop mid-step. "Tell her to look," High said loud enough to carry through the glass. "Tell Laura Voss to look at what's on this screen." Warren looked at Laura. She crossed the diner. She stood at the glass and looked at the image on High's phone. It was a photograph. Her daughter. Taken today. In the last hour. Not at the school, somewhere else. An interior space with concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. Chloe sitting in a chair with her hands in her lap and her serious expression on her face, the expression she wore like weather. She looked unharmed. Laura could see she was not restrained. She was simply sitting, and Ruiz was nowhere in the photograph. Laura's hand went flat against the glass. "Where is she?" she said. The glass muffled it. High could read lips well enough. "That," he said, "depends entirely on what Warren Grady does in the next 10 minutes." The cold pressed against the glass. The highway ran its flat, indifferent course through the desert, and Laura Voss, who had spent 2 years learning how to survive by moving, pressed her hand flat against the cold glass of a diner window and understood with absolute and final clarity that there was nowhere left to run, that the thing she had been surviving toward had arrived, and survival was no longer enough. Warren said very quietly without turning from the window, "Mick." "Yeah," Mick said. "Back door, east side of the building. Now." Mick was gone. She did not hear him move. He was simply present and then not present. Warren walked to the front door. He opened it. He stepped outside into the cold and stood 2 feet from High, with his hands at his sides and the morning air between them. Laura followed him out. She stood at Warren's shoulder. High looked at her. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had made a series of decisions that had seemed individually reasonable and had arrived somewhere he had not intended to be and who had not yet fully processed that fact. "Where is she?" Laura said. "She's fine," I said. "She's sitting in a room. She's got water. Nobody's told her to be scared." "Where?" Warren said. "That's not how this works," I said. "Nathan wants 10 minutes with Laura, alone. No backup, no phones, no recording. He talks, she listens. They reach an arrangement. He leaves." A pause. "When that's done, the kid comes back. And if she doesn't go," Laura said. I looked at her. "Then Nathan makes some calls. To the welfare investigator, to the family court contact in Utah." A pause. "And to the Denver account." The Denver account, Carl Eikuman, 2 assault convictions. She heard the reference land and felt her body register it before her mind finished processing the implication. Nathan still had access to it. It was still active. The arrangement, whatever it was still in place. "He's still working with Eichmann," she said. "I don't know names," I said. Too quickly. "Yes, you do," Warren said. I looked at him. Something moved across his face, not guilt exactly. The ghost of guilt. The outline where it had been before, it was replaced with justification. "Garrett," Warren said. His voice had changed lower, the particular register of a man speaking to someone he knew a long time ago and is now looking at across a distance he cannot fully measure. "What did he offer you?" I looked away. "The parcel," Deacon said. Laura turned. Deacon had come out from the side of the building, moving from the east with the careful deliberateness of a large man who had positioned himself without being observed. He stood at the edge of the parking lot with his arms at his sides. The weight of him, the absolute absence of performance in his posture, altered the geometry of the situation by several degrees. "Caslin agreed to transfer the parcel," Deacon said, "in exchange for the information about us, about me." His voice was flat. "That was the deal." I said nothing. "A piece of land," Deacon said. "That's what this cost." "It's my land," I said. The sudden brittleness in his voice, the way the justification cracked under direct examination, told Laura exactly how long he had been telling himself the story that made this acceptable. "It's not your land," Deacon said. "It was never your land. You know that." "You sold a child for a land dispute," Warren said. The sentence was quiet and precise, and it landed in the cold morning air like something irreversible. High's face changed brief, barely there. Something genuine moved across it. Not remorse. Something earlier than remorse. The moment of clear sight before the machinery of self-protection starts back up. Then it was gone. 10 minutes, I said. Laura goes to Nathan. The kid comes back. That's the offer. Laura looked at Warren. Warren looked at her. In the look between them was an entire conversation, the rapid wordless exchange of two people who had been through enough in the last 48 hours to understand each other's thinking without requiring it to be spoken. "Where's Nathan?" Warren said. "I'll take her," I said. "We're also," Warren said again. "Does it matter?" "Every detail matters," Warren said. "Where is he?" I hesitated. "Old mining office, off County Road 7, 8 miles east." "I know it," Deacon said. Warren looked at Laura. She could see him calculating the distance, the terrain, the time, the variables she couldn't fully see. "No," Warren said. "Not the way he's asking. She doesn't go alone. She doesn't go without a phone. She doesn't go as a prisoner." He paused. "She goes because she chooses to with me behind her at a distance Nathan can accept. And the child comes back before she walks in that door." "Nathan won't." "Nathan will," Warren said, "because if he doesn't, what happens next isn't something a land parcel covers. And you know that, Garrett. You know what we're capable of when we've run out of other options." A pause. "Tell him." I looked at Warren for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made the call. Laura listened to one side of it, High's clipped sentences, the pause, while Nathan's voice filled the other end in a register she couldn't hear, then High's confirmation. He ended the call. "Chloe comes out first," he said, "and then you go in." "Where does she come out?" Laura said. "I'll get her to the diner," I said. 15 minutes. "Deacon stays with her," Warren said. "Deacon doesn't move from this lot until we're back." Deacon looked at Laura. Something passed between them that was not words and was more reliable than words. "I'm not moving," he said. They waited. 15 minutes in a parking lot in Nevada in November is a very specific experience. The cold finds every gap in your clothing. The highway continues its indifferent movement of trucks and vehicles that don't know or care about the specific weight of a particular quarter hour. Laura stood next to Warren and did not speak. She did not look at High, who had retreated to the edge of the lot and was staring at his phone with the posture of a man who is committed to a course of action and is waiting for it to be over. She thought about the call Meredith had described Nathan's voice on the diner's landline, offering to make the welfare concern disappear. She thought about how clean that offer had sounded, how reasonable the structure of it was, how carefully designed to make her feel like there was a version of this she could control if she just cooperated once, just this one time. She understood now with a clarity that was almost physical that there was no version of cooperating with Nathan that led anywhere other than the place Mara Doyle had ended up. The understanding did not frighten her. It steadied her. There was a difference. At the 13-minute mark, a vehicle turned into the lot. Older SUV with a cracked taillight driven by a man she didn't recognize. The SUV stopped. The back door opened. Chloe climbed out. She was wearing her school backpack. Her hair was slightly disheveled. She had the art class drawing in her hand, the house, the tree, the horse that might have been a dog. She looked around the parking lot with the serious, assessing expression she wore when she wasn't sure what was happening and was deciding how to approach it. She saw Laura. The serious expression broke. She ran. Laura caught her and held her with both arms and her face pressed into her daughter's hair. And for 3 seconds, she was not calculating anything, was not assessing anything, was not managing or containing or compressing. For 3 seconds, she was only a mother holding her child. "Mom," Chloe said, "that was a weird morning." Laura pulled back, looked at her daughter's face, the automatic inventory of a parent confirming intact. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay," Chloe said. "The man said I was going to come see you. He had water bottles." A pause. The room smelled like chemicals. "You did great," Laura said. "You were so brave." Chloe looked at her with a 7-year-old's particular skepticism toward adult reassurance. "I wasn't scared," she said. "I was just waiting." Laura looked up at Deacon. He was already between Chloe and the rest of the parking lot. A very large man standing with his full weight forward, facing outward, the posture of a person who has decided what he is and has stopped arguing with it. "Hey," Deacon said to Chloe, "you like apple pie?" Chloe looked at him with full seriousness. "Is it from here?" "Best in Nevada," he said. "That's a big claim," she said. "Come in and check for yourself." He held the diner door open. Chloe looked at her mother. "Go," Laura said. "I'll be back soon." Chloe went inside with Deacon still holding the drawing, and the door swung shut behind them. And Laura stood in the cold parking lot and exhaled the breath she had been holding in one form or another since the text message about the playground. She turned to Warren. "Let's go," she said. County Road 7 ran east from the highway through 8 miles of flat desert before the land started rising toward the old mining district. Laura drove her car. Warren rode behind her at a distance close enough to be present, far enough to honor the specific version of the arrangement Nathan had agreed to. She could hear the Harley in her rearview mirror, low and steady and continuous. She had not been sure before this drive how she felt about that sound. She had grown up around her father's bike, had understood it as the sound of his particular independence, his way of moving through a world that had not always been kind to him. She had kept that at a distance, the way children sometimes keep a distance from the things that define their parents. A protective separation from inheritance. She did not keep the distance now. The sound of Warren's Harley behind her in the cold morning was the most grounding thing she had felt in 2 days, and she registered that fact honestly and did not apologize for it. The mining office appeared at the 8-mile mark. Nathan's dark gray sedan was parked in front. He was standing beside it with his hands in his jacket pockets, watching her pull in with the expression she had been seeing for 3 years. The patient expression, the expression of a man confirming the accuracy of a prediction he had made some time ago and was not surprised to find correct. She parked, got out, stood in front of her car and looked at him across 15 feet of cracked pavement. He looked older than he had in the diner 2 days ago. Not much older, but the particular thinness she had noted had resolved itself into something more specific in the outdoor light. She read it the way she had learned to read him, not the surface, but the structure under it. He was running on something unsustainable. The patience had a cost, and the cost was showing. Behind her, at the edge of the property, Warren's Harley idled. It did not stop. He sat at the entrance with both feet on the ground and his hands on the handlebars. Nathan looked at him for a long moment, made a visible choice to manage his reaction, and looked back at Laura. "Thank you for coming," Nathan said. She said nothing. "I know how this looks," he said. "I know you're—" "Stop," she said. He stopped. "You used my daughter," she said. "Whatever you were going to say, whatever frame you are putting around this, I don't want the frame. I want to know what you actually want." He looked at her. "I want you to come home," he said. The sentence was so simple it took her a moment to fully receive it. After everything, the legal filings, the welfare tip, the parallel infrastructure, the Denver account, the man named Eichmann, the woman in Colorado who had fallen from a staircase, the sentence he had arrived at the destination of all of it was the same sentence it had always been. "That's not possible," she said. "It is," he said. "If you stop—" "Nathan," she held up her hand. "I'm going to say something to you. I need you to listen." He stopped. "I know about Mara Doyle," she said. The temperature of the air between them changed. Not his expression. His expression was trained, but the temperature changed. She felt it. "Colorado Springs," she said. 2016, the staircase, the case that was ruled accidental. She kept her voice level. "I know about the Denver account. I know about Carl Eichmann." She paused. "I know what you paid him to do." Nathan was very still. The Harley idled at the entrance, low and steady. "That's a serious accusation," Nathan said. His voice had changed. The reasonable presentation was still there, but it had thinned the way a surface thins when the structure beneath it shifts. "It's not an accusation," Laura said. "It's documentation." She watched his face. The kind that's already been delivered to the right people this morning. She watched him process this. Watched him calculate. Watched the patience, the quality she had been most afraid of, most unable to fight the deep structural patience that had funded 9 days of driving and 3 months of legal filings and 8 years of methodology and counterinformation it had not accounted for. And she watched the calculation begin to cost him something he could not immediately replace. "You don't have documentation," he said. "Detective Raines does," she said. "Elko County Sheriff. She received it at 6 this morning. The interstate violation, the welfare tip trace, the transfer records." Another pause. Mara Doyle. Nathan looked at her. His jaw moved. "Whoever these people are," a gesture toward Warren at the entrance, his voice dropping into something careful and controlled. "They've given you a picture that isn't accurate. They have their own interests. They're using you." "They're keeping a promise," Laura said, "that my father made." She looked at him. "You know about the Ironbound. You know about Warren. You found High, and you got information about them specifically because you wanted to discredit them. Because you knew if someone believed what they built, it would hold." She held his eyes. "You came here because you knew I'd found people. That scared you. Not because they're dangerous, because they're credible." She held his eyes and did not look away. "You've been doing this for 8 years because the women you did it to were alone. I am not alone." Nathan took a step toward her. The Harley at the entrance revved once, not dramatically, a single controlled increase in engine volume, and then back to idle. Nathan stopped, looked at Warren. Something moved across his face that she recognized from the diner 2 days ago, not the patient expression, not the reasonable presentation, but the thing that lived under both of them, the thing she had spent 2 years running from, that she was now standing 30 feet from in a cracked parking lot with the winter sky pressing flat overhead. He was calculating whether he had options left. She watched him calculate. She watched him arrive at the edges of what he had. And she saw the moment precise and unmistakable when he found one he hadn't used yet. He reached into his jacket. The Harley's engine jumped. Warren was off the bike before she could process the movement, simply on it and then not on it, crossing the lot with the measured, rapid stride of a man who has trained himself not to run because running produces errors. And errors in this kind of space have consequences. He covered the distance in 4 seconds and was at her shoulder as Nathan's hand came out of his jacket. Phone, just a phone. Nathan held it up so they could both see the screen. A call in progress, an audio call already connected to a number she didn't recognize. "Say hello to Carl," Nathan said. His voice had dropped all the way out of reasonable and into something that was not quite calm and not quite rage, but lived in the narrow space between them. He's been on the line for the last 3 minutes, Nathan said. He was looking at Warren now, not at her. He knows your name. He knows your face. He knows your daughter's name and her school and your home address. He paused. Whatever documentation you have on those transfers, even if it goes somewhere, Carl operates on a retained basis. I don't make a call. I don't make any call. He's paid to act if 30 days go by without contact. Warren's hand on her shoulder steadying. You're telling me you built a dead man switch, Warren said. I'm telling you the situation is more complex than your documentation covers, Nathan said. Where is he? Warren said. Somewhere you're not, Nathan said. The line was still open, the phone still held up between them like an exhibit, and Laura looked at it and thought about Mick, who had gone out the back of the diner at Warren's instruction and had not been mentioned since. She thought about the way these men move through situations, finding gaps, repositioning without announcement. She thought about Dex's laptop and the transfer records and the number trace that had been running on Nathan's calls since Wednesday. She looked at Warren. Warren was looking at the phone. His expression had the hairline crack in it again, but his hand on her shoulder was steady. How long has the 30-day clock been running? He said. Nathan looked at him. Long enough, Nathan said. That's not an answer, Warren said. It's the answer you get, Nathan said. Laura looked at the open call. She thought about a man she had never seen sitting somewhere in Nevada or somewhere else entirely retained waiting for a contact that had not come in 30 days. She thought about the specific architecture of that, the patience of it, the way it operated entirely outside her ability to see or reach it, designed to persist past any intervention she or Warren or Dex or Rains could make. She thought about Mara Doyle. She thought about the difference between Mara Doyle's situation and hers. Mara Doyle had been alone. She turned to Warren. Your phone, she said. He looked at her. Give me your phone, she said. He reached into his jacket and handed it to her without asking why. She took it and dialed Dex's number from memory. Dex answered on the second ring. The Denver account, she said. Carl Eichmann. Is there an active number in the transfer records, a contact number? A pause. Keyboard sounds. There's a callback number on one of the 2015 transfers, Dex said. Landline, Colorado area code, whether it's still active. Text it to Warren's phone, she said. She handed the phone back to Warren. Nathan was watching her. The patience had been replaced entirely by something else now, something trying to reassemble itself into patience and not quite managing it. Warren's phone buzzed. He looked at it, showed it to her. She looked at the number. She held up Nathan's phone, the open call, Carl on the line, 3 minutes of listening already done. And she looked at Nathan and said, Does Carl know you've been building a case in Colorado for 8 years? Does Carl know about Mara Doyle? Does Carl know that Dex has the transfer records that connect him to a suspicious death? She paused. Does Carl know that Detective Rains is currently building a warrant? Nathan's expression changed. Because Carl might be retained, she said. But Carl is also a man with 2 assault convictions who is currently connected by financial records to a potential homicide. And a man in that position, she looked at the phone, a man in that position might decide that 30 days of silence is better than the alternative. Into the open call clearly, she said, Carl, if you can hear this, the records exist. They have your account. They have the transfers. 48 hours from now, a warrant is going to be issued in Colorado that includes your name. A pause. Whatever he's paying you, it's not enough to cover a homicide accessory charge. The call was silent. She looked at Nathan. His face was doing something complicated and difficult and entirely without the patient expression. He moved not toward her, toward Warren. A sudden forward step, his arm coming up in a motion that existed in the space between a man who had planned everything and a man who has run out of plan and is operating on the thing that was always underneath the planning. Warren didn't move back. He moved into it. His forearm came up and redirected Nathan's arm with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned that lesson in an environment with higher stakes than a parking lot. Nathan's momentum carried him forward. Warren pivoted and Nathan hit the side of Laura's car with his shoulder and stayed there. Warren's hand at the back of his collar, Nathan's face against the cold metal of the car door. Nathan was breathing hard. Warren was not. You're done, Warren said quietly. You hear me. This is done. Nathan's hands were on the car. His phone had fallen. The call had ended, whether Carl hung up or the impact ended, it she didn't know. The documentation is already with Rains, Warren said. Mara Doyle is in it. Carl Eichmann is in it. You drove 9 days across state lines to violate an existing protective order. You filed a fraudulent welfare concern. You retained a man with assault convictions. He paused. Every decision you have made in the last 9 days is documented and time-stamped and in the hands of a law enforcement officer who is currently building a case. Another pause. There's nothing left to threaten her with. Nathan said nothing. His breathing was hard and ragged against the car door. The only move you have left, Warren said, is to call Carl and make sure he knows the deal is off. That it's been off since this morning. That retaining him going forward is not a thing you're doing. He paused. You do that in front of me right now. The desert around them continued its vast, indifferent existence. The highway was a sound at the edge of everything continuous and uninvolved. Make the call, Nathan, Laura said. Nathan turned his head, fractionally looked at her along the line of his own shoulder, his face against the cold metal of the car door. He looked at her with the full architecture of himself visible for the first time. Not the patient expression, not the reasonable presentation, not the legal sophistication or the local network or the dead man switch. Just the face of a man who had run every option and found the end of them looking at a woman who was still standing. Laura met his eyes and did not look away. Make the call, she said again. Warren eased back. Nathan straightened slowly. He picked up his phone from the ground, a crack in the screen, now spiderweb from the upper corner. He looked at it for a moment. He dialed. The call connected. It's over, Nathan said into the phone. His voice was flat and stripped of all performance. Stand down. The arrangement is terminated. Don't contact me. He ended the call. Warren stepped back fully. Nathan stood beside his car with his cracked phone in his hand and the winter sky above him and the absolute completion of a particular version of his life visible in the set of his shoulders. Laura looked at him. She had imagined this moment or something like it in the years of running, had imagined the confrontation that would end it, the words that would matter, had imagined herself saying things, the accumulated things, the true things, the things that had been compressed for so long they had become almost physical. She did not say any of them, not because they weren't true, because they weren't for him. You're going to stay right here, Warren said to Nathan. Deacon's calling Rains. She'll have a car here in 20 minutes. Nathan looked at the ground. He looked very tired. He looked like a man who had been running his own version of something for 8 years and had just set it down and discovered how heavy it had actually been. She almost felt something, almost. Then she thought about Chloe in a concrete room, smelling of chemicals, sitting in a chair with her hands in her lap and her serious expression on waiting. Waiting the way her mother had taught her without knowing she had been taught. Not scared, just waiting. Because she had spent her whole short life in motion and had learned that waiting was what you did until the next move became clear. She did not feel anything else. Warren looked at her. Let's go, he said. She turned toward her car. Her hand was on the door handle when Nathan spoke. She's not safe, he said. She stopped, turned. He was looking at her, not with the patient expression, not the reasonable one, with something she had never seen on his face in 3 years, something that did not have a performance in it at all. Carl, he said, I called him. I said the arrangement is terminated. A pause. But Carl doesn't work alone. The cold air, the sound of the Harley still idling, the sky overhead pale and flat. What does that mean? Warren said. Nathan looked at him. It means the man I retained is a coordinator, he said. He doesn't do the work himself. He uses people. A pause. Local people. He stopped. I don't know who he used locally. I never asked. The cold held everything still for a moment. Warren turned from Nathan and looked at Laura. The look between them covered the same ground it had covered in the diner 2 days ago, the rapid, wordless exchange of people who had learned each other's thinking under pressure and now operated in a register below language. She saw him run it, saw him arrive at the same place she was arriving. Carl Eichmann was a coordinator. Carl had local people. They had just told Carl on an open line that a warrant was coming, that the records existed, that his name was in them. A man in that position did not wait to see if the warrant materialized. A man in that position moved. Warren had his phone to his ear before she finished the thought. Dex, the number you traced for Eichmann, run everything connected to it. Any local numbers, any Nevada area codes. Right now. He paused, listening. I don't care what it takes. Right now. He looked at Laura. Vera's, he said. Chloe. She was already moving toward her car. No, Warren said. With me. She looked at him. Your car is known, he said. Your plates are known. If Eichmann has a local contact who's been watching the situation, your car is the first thing they're looking for. He was already walking toward the Harley. Get on, he said. She had never been on a motorcycle in her adult life. She got on. Warren kicked the engine over, and the Harley came alive beneath them with a sound that was nothing like she had expected from a distance. Up close, it was immediate and physical, a vibration that went through the seat and up through her spine and into her chest. She put her hands on Warren's jacket and held on, and he pulled out of the mining lot onto County Road 7 heading west and opened it up. The desert came at them. The cold hit her face and her eyes watered from it, and she pressed closer to Warren's back. And the Harley ate the cracked road in long, leaning strides. And she understood for the first time in a way she had not understood from a distance what her father had found in this. The absolute presence of it. The way it demanded everything and gave back something that had no name in the available vocabulary. 8 miles back to the highway, 3 miles south. The turnoff to Vera's property appeared on the right. Warren pulled in, and the dogs were alert but not alarmed, which she had learned in the last minute of the ride was a data point she could use because dogs made better sentinels than assumptions. The front door opened. Ruiz stepped out. He looked at Warren and something passed between them in the rapid biker shorthand she had been reading for 2 days. Then he looked at Laura, and the expression on his face was the specific expression of a man who has been holding a position and is relieved to hand it over to someone with more authority. She's inside, he said. She's fine. She ate 2 sandwiches. The inside of the house had the lived quality of a space inhabited for a long time by a person with strong opinions about what mattered. Vera was at the stove, 70 or near it, white hair cut short, a face that had lived outdoors for most of its life. She wore a flannel shirt and moved with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had stopped performing anything for anyone and simply occupied space on her own terms. She looked at Laura when she came through the door and gave her a nod that communicated several things at once: acknowledgement, assessment, and the passing of a verdict that appeared to be favorable. Coffee, Vera said. Not a question. Yes, Laura said. Sit. Laura sat at the kitchen table. She could hear Chloe in the back of the house, a voice, then one of the dogs responding, then the specific laugh that rearranged whatever room it was in. The tightness in Laura's chest that had been present in one form or another for 3 days loosened fractionally. The way a fist loosens when the thing it was protecting is confirmed safe. Warren stood in the doorway, phone to his ear, speaking in the clipped shorthand. Vera set coffee in front of Laura. Then she sat across from her and put both hands around her own mug and looked at Laura with the directness of a woman who had long ago stopped softening direct things. Your father used to sit in that exact chair, Vera said. Laura looked at the chair. He came here twice, Vera said. Both times he was working something out. He'd sit there for about an hour, drink about 4 cups of coffee, then say thank you and leave. He'd always figured out whatever it was. A pause. He never said much, but he'd leave clearer. He built this, Laura said quietly. All of it. The promise to warn the network. He built a safety system and never told me it existed. He told you the pieces, Vera said. The signal, the thinking. She tilted her head. He was old-fashioned enough to believe people needed to discover the shape of things for themselves. Find out what held. A pause. He wasn't wrong. He just ran out of time to see how it turned out. Warren came through the doorway. Dex found a Nevada number in Eichmann's contact records, he said. Registered to a man named Philip Suarez, Elko address. He looked at Vera. Your neighbor, 3 properties east. Vera looked at him for a long moment. Bill Suarez, she said. Her voice had gone flat in a specific way. His cousin works construction for Caslin. Eichmann called that number 40 minutes ago, Warren said. Before we left the mining lot, the call lasted 90 seconds. 90 seconds was enough. Laura looked at Warren. He knows Chloe is here. Possibly, Warren said. If Suarez has been watching this property. Where is Suarez now? She said. Warren's phone buzzed. He looked at it. Mick, he said and answered. She watched his face while he listened. What she saw was not the hairline crack from earlier. It was something further along than that, something that had already processed the information and arrived at a response. Copy, he said. Hold. He looked at Vera. Truck on the road coming in from the north, about a mile out. Vera stood from the table without hurry. She went to the kitchen counter and opened a drawer and removed a two-way radio, switched it on and said 2 words into it. Company coming. A click from the other end, then a voice Laura didn't recognize. Copy that. Laura looked at Vera. My neighbor to the west has been watching this property since Tuesday, Vera said simply. Warren asked me to make arrangements. She set the radio on the counter. I made arrangements Tuesday. Tuesday. Before the diner, before the signal, before any of it was visible to Laura. Her father had built this years ago and it was still working, still running the infrastructure of it, extending in directions she couldn't see. A network of people who had made commitments to each other and honored them in the specific way of people who had learned that honor was not an announcement but a practice. Back room, Warren said to Laura. No, she said. He looked at her. I'm not going in the back room, she said. I'm done going in the back room. She looked at him. What do you need me to do? He studied her for a moment. Stay inside, he said. Stay back from the windows. If Chloe asks what's happening, tell her nothing interesting. He paused. And if he comes to the door? He won't make it to the door, Warren said. He went outside. Ruiz followed. Laura went to the back room, not to hide, but to get Chloe. Her daughter was sitting on a low bed with the largest of the 3 dogs, a gray and tan shepherd mix, who had apparently decided Chloe was acceptable and was in the process of listening to Chloe explain the difference between a horse and a dog using the drawing as a visual aid. Chloe looked up when Laura came in. Mom, this dog is very smart. I can see that, Laura said. His name is Beryl, Chloe said. Vera said he was named after a barrel cactus, but I think he looks more like a barrel because he's round in the middle. Both things can be true, Laura said. She sat on the edge of the bed next to her daughter and put an arm around her. Chloe leaned into it with the automatic ease of long practice. Outside, the sound of a vehicle on the gravel road slowing, and then from farther away the specific low register of a Harley engine. Not approaching, holding position. The sound of something that had already been where it needed to be before the vehicle arrived. Chloe looked at the window. Are those your friends? Yes, Laura said. The biker guys. Yes, Chloe considered this. They were at the diner, the day with the apple pie. A pause. Deacon said the apple pie was the best in Nevada, but I think it was only okay. I didn't tell him that because he seemed like he really believed it. Laura looked at her daughter, 7 years old and already navigating the gap between truth and kindness with more sophistication than most adults. That was thoughtful, Laura said. I know, Chloe said without particular pride. Just information. Outside voices low controlled the exchange of men managing a situation without escalating it. She could not hear words. She did not try. She sat on the low bed with her arm around her daughter and the bunker's warm weight against them both, and she listened to the sound of it. The voices, the gravel, the idling engine, and she waited. The voices stopped. A door, a vehicle tires on gravel moving away, then silence. Then after a long moment, Warren's voice from the front of the house. Clear. She exhaled. Chloe looked at her. You do that thing, Chloe said, where you breathe like that when something is over. What thing? Summese. Like you were holding your breath, but really long. She demonstrated a subtle, controlled containment, followed by a slow release. She had been watching her mother breathe for 7 years and had cataloged the variations. Yeah, Laura said, I do that. I do it too sometimes, Chloe said. When I'm waiting. Laura pulled her closer. They sat like that for a moment, mother and daughter, in the boy named Beryl in the back room of a woman's house in the Nevada desert, while outside the men who had been holding the perimeter stood in the cold and the morning continued without requiring anything more from any of them. At least for now, at least for this particular hour. Philip Suarez had arrived with the specific intention of a man who had been given 90 seconds of instruction and had not fully thought through the destination of those instructions. Mick had been on the road before him. Ruiz had come around the west side of the property. Warren had stood in the driveway. 3 men visible before Suarez's truck had fully stopped. He had not gotten out. He had looked at Warren through his windshield, and Warren had looked back with the particular quality of a man who has nothing to prove and has already made his decision about how this ends. And what Suarez had read in that look, the flat, clear, entirely unperformative certainty of it, had been enough. He had put the truck in reverse. He had driven back out to the road and turned north. Mick had followed him for 2 miles to confirm the direction and then turned back. It was not a resolution. Laura understood that when Warren came in and stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her with Chloe now attached to her hip in the particular way of a child who has decided proximity is the correct stance for the remainder of the day. Suarez is a secondary problem, Warren said. Eichmann is the primary. Raines has the call log now. Dex forwarded the trace 10 minutes ago. The 90-second call from Eichmann to Suarez is documented. That adds conspiracy to the existing case. Eichmann doesn't know that yet, Laura said. He will by end of day, Warren said. She looked at him. Is it over? Warren was quiet for a moment. The quality of honest consideration, not the hesitation of someone managing what they say, but the pause of someone who refuses to say more than they can support. Nathan is in custody, he said. Raines had a unit at the mining lot inside 20 minutes. The interstate violation alone is enough to hold him. A pause. Eichmann's position gets worse every hour Raines has the file. The Mara Doyle connection is going to bring Colorado into it. He paused again. It's not going to be clean. It's going to be months of process and documentation and hearings. He looked at her. But the infrastructure he built around you, the legal filings, the welfare concern, the local network, all of it is now inside an active investigation. It's not operating against you anymore. It's evidence. She sat with that. The difference between infrastructure operating against her and that same infrastructure becoming evidence against him was not a small difference. It was the difference between 2 years of running and the possibility of standing still. The welfare concern, she said. Withdrawn this morning, Dex said from the front room, not looking up from his laptop. Raines contacted the Family Services office at 9:40. The investigation is suspended pending the criminal proceeding. Chloe was looking at Dex with the focused assessment of a child encountering a new category of adult. Are you a lawyer? She asked him. Dex looked up, considered the question with the same precision he brought to everything. Paralegal, he said. What's the difference? Chloe said. About $150,000 a year, Dex said. Chloe processed this. Is that good or bad? Depends on which side of it you're on. Heck, I am. Dex said. Chloe appeared to find this acceptable and turned her attention back to the dog. Something shifted in the room, not dramatically. The way pressure shifts when a window is opened in a closed space, not a transformation, just an equalization. The acute tension that had been present since the mining lot loosened a single degree. Vera made more coffee. Ruiz sat at the kitchen table and stretched his legs out and looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man reaching the end of a long, sustained effort. Mick came in from outside and leaned against the counter and said nothing, and no one required him to say anything. Deacon arrived 20 minutes later. He had come from the diner where he had apparently stayed with the situation there. Meredith, the intact breakfast routine, and when he filled the doorway and Chloe looked up at him from the floor where she was sitting with Beryl, she said the apple pie was okay. Deacon looked at her. Just okay? It was fine, Chloe said diplomatically. For Nevada. Deacon looked at Warren. She's James's granddaughter, Warren said. Deacon sat down. The afternoon came slowly. Raines called Warren twice. Dex took one call from a Colorado number that lasted 6 minutes and afterwards said only that things were moving in the expected direction. Suarez had not returned. Caslin, when Mick drove past his property at midday, was gone, vehicle absent, visible in no direction. Men who understood when a situation had changed. At 3, Vera produced food from her kitchen in the straightforward manner of a woman who fed people, as a basic expression of care without making a production of it. Soup bread, the specific plainness of a meal that made no argument for itself beyond being hot and present. They sat at the table, all of them. Warren, Deacon, Mick, Ruiz, Dex, Vera, Laura, Chloe. The table was not large enough without additional chairs pulled from other rooms. And the kitchen was not designed for this number of people, and none of that mattered. Chloe sat between Laura and Deacon and ate her soup with the focused efficiency of a child who had been operating outside her normal routine for many hours and was operating now on the reliable comfort of a hot meal. She had asked twice more about Beryl. She had been told she could visit again which she received with the serious satisfaction of a confirmed arrangement. Nobody spoke much during the meal, not from tension. From the other thing, the specific quiet of people who have been through something together and are now in the long exhale on the other side of it. The kind of quiet that does not require filling. Warren ate slowly. Laura watched him from across the table. The silver hair, the scarred jaw, the face that had been carrying something for 3 years and was now carrying it differently, still present, but redistributed into something more sustainable. After a while, he looked up and found her watching him. She did not look away. "He kept a letter," Warren said. She looked at him. "Your father," he said. "He wrote it about 6 months before he died. He gave it to me and told me to keep it until there was a reason to pass it along." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and set an envelope on the table between them. Her name on the front, her father's handwriting, the particular deliberateness of a man whose hands were better suited to engines than pens, but who made the effort anyway. She looked at it for a long moment. Chloe beside her had stopped eating and was looking at the envelope. "Is that for you, Mom?" "Yes," Laura said. "Is it good or bad?" Laura picked it up. "Good," she said. "I think it's good." She did not open it at the table. She held it in her lap for the rest of the meal and felt the weight of it. Not heavy, not a formal weight, just the specific physical reality of a piece of paper that contained her father's last considered words to her, written 6 months before he died, carried for 3 years in the inside pocket of a man she had only met 2 days ago. She let herself feel that without managing it, which was itself something new. Later, when the meal was done and Chloe was in the back room with Beryl, and the afternoon had gone to early dark, she sat in the front room with the wood stove going and the lamp on, and she opened it. The handwriting was careful. He had taken his time. "Laura, I'm going to make this practical because you know me, and you know I don't do the other kind well. I built something. It took years. It's not perfect, and some of the people in it are complicated, and none of them are easy, but they're real, and real is what holds when everything else goes. Warren Grady is the best version of the man I tried to be. If he's reading this with you, or if you found your way to him, then the thing I built is working. The signal, you probably forgot about it. I didn't. I gave it to Warren years ago and told him what it looked like, and told him if he ever saw a woman use it to look twice because you never know. I should have told you more about all of it. I kept thinking there was more time. There was not more time. That is the only thing I regret. You are the best decision I ever made. Watching you learn to stand up when things knocked you down was the most significant thing I ever witnessed. I'm sorry I will not be there for the rest of it, but I sent some people ahead. They'll be there. Don't run anymore, kid. You were never built for running. You were built for standing, Dad." She sat for a long time with the letter in her hands. The wood stove ticked and breathed. The lamp made a warm circle. Outside, the Nevada dark had come down fully, and the stars over the desert were the winter stars, cold and numerous and indifferent in the way that was somehow also comforting. The reminder that at the world scale, most urgency is temporary. Warren was on the porch. She could sense him out there, not a sound exactly, but a presence the way you sense someone standing near a window from inside a room. She folded the letter and put it in her jacket pocket and stood up and went outside. He was standing at the edge of the porch with his arms on the railing, looking at the dark. His jacket collar was up against the cold. He had a cup of coffee going cold in one hand. She stood beside him. "He wrote it well," she said. Warren looked at the dark. "He wrote it like him. That's the same thing." A pause. "He said you were the best version of the man he tried to be," she said. Warren's jaw moved, the slightest thing. "He was wrong about that," he said, "but I'll take it." She looked at him. "Why did you come?" she said. 3 years of holding that promise, you could have decided it wasn't your obligation anymore. He was gone, nobody would have known. Warren turned the cold coffee mug in his hands. "I would have known," he said. She looked back at the desert. "The ironbound," she said. "You said you went quiet 4 years ago." "Yes." Are you going quiet again after this?" He thought about it for a moment, the honest quality of the consideration. "No," he said, "I don't think so." "Good," she said. They stood in the cold for a while, not talking. The stars very clear, the sound of the desert at night vanished in breathing. The front door opened behind them. Chloe in her jacket hair slightly wild from the shepherd's attention, holding a new drawing. The adobe house, the begs. and a row of motorcycles she had rendered with the focused inaccuracy of a child drawing something she had looked at carefully but not yet fully understood. The wheels were large. The engines implied rather than depicted, but the feeling of them was right. The presence of them. The way they occupied the bottom of the drawing with a solidity that anchored everything above. "I drew Vera's house," she said. Laura took it and looked at it. "It's excellent." Chloe looked at Warren. "I drew your bikes," she said. She pointed to one of the abstract forms in the middle. "Yours is the one in the middle, because you're in the middle of everything." Warren looked at the drawing for a long moment. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe." Chloe accepted this and went back inside to report to Burrow. Laura stood with the drawing in her hands. She looked at the motorcycles her daughter had drawn. Abstract felt rather than render the impression of something heavy and present and grounded at the bottom of the page. Something that held the picture together without being the subject of it. She folded the drawing carefully and put it in her jacket pocket next to her father's letter. She turned back to the desert. They stood there a while longer, Warren and Laura, while inside the house the voices of men who had been running on adrenaline and cold coffee for 3 days dropped gradually toward ordinary register. Vera said something that made Deacon laugh, a sound she had not heard before, large and surprised. Chloe's voice asked a question that was answered, judging by tone, satisfactorily. The sounds of a house at the end of a long day. Nothing dramatic, nothing declared. Just the ordinary noise of people who had come through something together and were for the moment in the same warm space on the other side of it. At 9, Warren drove them home. Not on the Harley Ruiz followed in his car with Chloe buckled in the back, asleep with the single-mindedness of a child who had held it together admirably and was now done holding anything. Warren rode ahead. Laura drove with Ruiz behind her and Warren's taillight steady in front, and the 3 vehicles moved through the dark Nevada desert toward Ridgeback. She watched the tail light and thought about her father's letter, about the drawing in her pocket, about the way the cold air had smelled on the porch, about all the mornings she had woken up in new towns with $40 and a careful plan and a daughter who did not complain and a fear she had been carrying so long it had started to feel like part of her weight. "Don't run anymore, kid. You were never built for running." She had not run today. She had stood in a cracked parking lot and said her daughter's name over an open phone line to a man she had never met. She had stood in a diner doorway and watched her daughter come running across a parking lot. She had sat at a kitchen table and read a letter from a dead man who had loved her practically and had built the structure of that love in the specific way it was needed before it was needed. She had not run. They reached Ridgeback at 9:40. Ruiz carried Chloe inside without waking her, set her on the bed, pulled the blanket up, looked at Laura in the doorway with a brief nod that covered everything it needed to cover. He left. She stood in the doorway of her daughter's room in the lamplight. Chloe's face had the particular quality of sleeping children. The softness that sleep allows, the unguarded openness of a face that has put down whatever it was holding for the day. One hand tucked under her cheek, the other flung out toward the edge of the bed in the abandoned freedom of unconscious sleep. Laura stood there for a long time. Then she went to the kitchen and put the kettle on and sat at the table and took both items from her jacket pocket, the letter and the drawing, and set them in front of her. Her father's handwriting. Her daughter's hand. The kettle boiled. She made tea and sat with it and looked at the 2 pieces of paper for a while without thinking much. Just looking. Just being in the quiet kitchen at the end of the longest day with the heat of the mug in her hands and the sound of her daughter's breathing through the wall. A knock at the door. Quiet. 2 knocks. She went to the door and opened it. Warren. He had parked the Harley at the curb and walked up. He was holding something, a small box worn at the corners, the kind of box that had been kept in a specific place for a long time. "Almost forgot," he said. "I had this in my saddlebag. I've been carrying it for 3 years. He held it out. She took it, opened it. Inside, wrapped in a cloth that might once have been part of a flannel shirt, was a compass. Small brass with a case that had been scratched and dented through decades of use. She turned it in her hands. The needle settled north with the patient certainty of something that knows its direction and does not argue about it. She turned it over. Engraved on the back, in the careful, deliberate handwriting of a man whose hands were better suited to engines than pens, for when you need to know which way is home. She closed her hand around it. "He gave it to me the week before he died," Warren said. "Said he'd been carrying it for 30 years. Said it was time to pass it on." A pause, Sean. "Said he'd know when." She held the compass in her closed hand and felt the metal warm from her grip. "Thank you," she said. It was insufficient, and she knew it. "Don't thank me," he said. "Thank James." "I will," she said, "when I figure out how." He nodded once, started back toward the Harley. "Warren," she said. He stopped. "Will you come back?" she said. Not because of any of this. Just, will you come back?" He stood there for a moment in the cold Nevada dark, his back to her. "We'll be around," he said. He got on the Harley. The engine started that sound, that specific low register, that ground level vibration. And he pulled away from the curb and rolled down the quiet street, unhurried, moving through the pools of streetlights one at a time, until the light and the sound both diminished and the street was dark and quiet again. She stood at the open door. The Nevada night was very cold and very clear. She listened until the engine was gone. Then she went back inside. She went to Chloe's room and stood in the doorway again. The sleeping face, the flung-out arm, the chest rising and falling in the simple, reliable rhythm of a child who had decided at the end of a complicated day that she was safe enough to let go and sleep. Laura reached into her pocket. She took out the compass. She set it on Chloe's nightstand. Not a warning, not a survival tool, not a thing born from fear, a thing born from the knowledge that some people show up. That promises made in advance of need are the only promises worth making. She turned off the lamp. She left the door open a few inches. She walked to the front of the house and turned off the lights one by one until only the porch light was on. She stood in the dark living room for a moment, looking at the street through the window she had been watching for 3 days. Nothing moved. No sedan at the end of the block. No running lights in the cold. No one watching. Just the street. Just Ridgeback. Just Nevada in November. She turned off the porch light. She went to bed. For the first time in 2 years, she lay down without checking the locks first. She lay in the dark and listened to the quiet. The wind, the distant highway, the small sounds of a house settling into itself at night. And she held the sound of a Harley engine in her memory, already fading, moving away down a dark Nevada street. Not a threat, not a warning, just the sound of a promise being kept. But the quiet that settled over Ridgeback that night was not the quiet of a story finished. It was the quiet of a story catching its breath. Because 300 miles south in a county jail interview room in Henderson, Nathan Vale was sitting across from a public defender he had met 11 minutes ago, and doing what Nathan Vale always did when cornered. He was talking, constructing, building a new frame around the existing facts. And the public defender, a young woman named Cassidy Orr who had been practicing for 4 years and had heard a great many constructed frames, was writing things down with the careful neutrality of someone who understood that her job was not to evaluate what she was being told, but to understand what her client believed was useful. What Nathan believed was useful was this: the Ironbound had a history. Deacon specifically had a history. And a sealed civil settlement, not the same thing as a secret. It was a document, and documents could be found by people who knew where to look. He had found it. High had confirmed the details. And if Detective Raines was building a case that relied on the credibility of Warren Grady's chapter, then the chapter's credibility was a door that could be opened from the other direction. Nathan leaned forward and said to Cassidy Orr very quietly and very precisely, "I need you to make a call to a man named Garrett High. Tell him the conversation we had about Deacon Falk needs to happen now, not tomorrow. Tonight." Cassidy Orr wrote the name down. She did not know what it meant yet. She would find out. And 300 miles north, in a house where a woman had just gone to bed for the first time in 2 years without checking the locks, the compass on a 7-year-old's nightstand sat pointing steadily north, the way it had been pointing for 30 years, reliable and indifferent to whatever was coming next. Laura had been asleep for 40 minutes when her phone buzzed. She was a light sleeper, had been for 2 years. She reached for the phone before she was fully awake, the reflex of it so embedded it operated below consciousness. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize, different from any of the others. She answered. "Ms. Voss," a woman's voice, clipped, professional. "This is Detective Raines." Laura sat up. What is it? "I'm sorry to call this late. We have a situation." A pause, the specific pause of someone choosing language carefully. "Nathan Vale has had a conversation with his public defender. We believe he's made contact with Garrett High." "He's in custody," Laura said. "How did he?" His attorney is not in custody, Rain said simply. An attorney-client communication is not something we can monitor. We became aware of it through a separate line of information. She paused. Ms. Voss, High appears to be preparing to make a statement. To us. Tonight. Laura was fully awake now. What kind of statement? The kind, Rain said carefully, that would reframe the role of Warren Grady's chapter in this situation. In a direction that is not favorable to you. She understood immediately. Nathan had found the one door that could still be opened. High, who had sold information once, could sell it again this time, to the other side, dressed differently, framed as a concerned witness, providing context about the men who had inserted themselves into a domestic situation involving a child. Deacon's sealed history, the chapters past, the specific texture of men with complicated records positioning themselves as protectors. It was elegant, and it was dangerous, and it was exactly the move she would have expected from Nathan if she had not assumed that Nathan being in custody meant Nathan was out of moves. Nathan in custody was not Nathan without moves. She should have known that. She had known that somewhere underneath the exhaustion of the day. She had just allowed herself to believe for 40 minutes that the quiet was real. She called Warren before she finished the thought. He answered on the first ring. I know, he said. You already know. Rains called Dex first, he said. Dex called me 2 minutes ago. What does it mean for the case? It depends on what High actually says, Warren said. If he walks into Rain's office and gives her a narrative about the Ironbound inserting itself into a custody dispute between a man and his former partner, and he has details about Deacon's record. He stopped. It doesn't kill the case, but it complicates it. It gives Nathan's defense something to work with. Reasonable doubt about our motives. About why we were here. You were here because of a promise, she said. I know why we were here, Warren said. What matters is what it looks like to someone who doesn't. She pressed her hand flat against the mattress, the same gesture she had made against the diner counter 2 days ago, the same grounding reflex. Thinking. Running the problem the way her father had taught her to run problems. From the inside out, not the outside in. Not, what does this look like? What is this actually? What does High actually have? She said. Not what Nathan told him to say. What does High actually know that's verifiable? Warren was quiet for a moment. The civil suit details, he said. Deacon's federal sentence. The chapter's history. General information about our methods. All of which is either sealed or general knowledge, she said. Yes. So what High is offering Rains is interpretation, not evidence, she said. He's offering her a frame, a way of reading the facts that are already in the record. She paused. And Rains is a person, not a machine. She can choose which frame to apply. Yes, Warren said. Then we need to give her a better frame before High does, Laura said. Tonight. A silence. Laura, I'm not asking you to fabricate anything, she said. I'm asking you to tell her the truth about why you were here in the way that makes the truth legible. For Nathan's version gets there first. She paused. Can we get Dex to Rains tonight with the letter? What letter? My father's letter, she said, Warren. It explains everything, why you were here, what the promise was, who my father was to your chapter, and why this was never about Deacon's history or the Ironbound's history. It was about a man keeping a promise to his dead friend. She paused. That's not a complicated story. It's the simplest story there is. Warren was quiet for a long moment. She could hear him thinking. Not indecision, the specific silence of a man running a calculation he wants to get right. The letter is personal, he said finally. I know, she said. It's also evidence. Evidence of intent. She paused. Do you have a problem with that? No, Warren said. James would want it used. Then let's use it. Dex was at Rain's office by 11:15. He had the full file, the letter, and a 4-page memo he had drafted in the car on the way there, the memo being a paralegal's distillation of the Ironbound's involvement in the situation organized chronologically with citations to every document in the file that supported each claim. Dex was, as Warren had once said, the best version of what a paralegal could be in an environment that required precision over comfort. Rains received him with the professional neutrality of a detective who had been doing this long enough to know that information from complicated sources was still information. She read the memo. She read the letter. She asked 3 questions. Dex answered each of them in the smallest useful unit of words and waited for the next. At 12:40, Rains called Warren. I came in, she said. And, Warren said. And he said what Nathan told him to say, Rains said, which was interesting because it was almost word for word what I would have expected someone to say if they had been given a script rather than arrived at a position organically. A pause. I've been doing this for 19 years. I know the difference. Warren exhaled, slow, controlled. Does it change anything? It changes my timeline, Rain said. I'm moving the warrant application to first thing tomorrow morning instead of waiting for the full 48 hours. The high statement reads as coordinated obstruction, and I'd rather have the warrant in hand before Nathan's defense has a chance to file anything in response to it. She paused. Tell Ms. Voss I said good call on the letter. Warren called Laura at 12:52. She was not asleep. She was sitting at the kitchen table with the tea gone cold and the compass in her hand and the drawing in front of her, looking at the motorcycles her daughter had rendered with a child's specific exuberant inaccuracy. The wheels too large, the engines implied, but the feeling exactly right. Rains is moving the warrant to tomorrow morning, Warren said. Because of high. Because of high, he said, and because of the letter. She read it. She read it. A pause. She said, and I'm quoting this exactly because it matters, she said it reads as the single most credible document in the file. Laura set the compass down on the table next to the drawing, next to her father's letter which she had refolded and set between them. 3 objects, all from the same source, all arriving in her hands in the same 48 hours after 3 years of traveling toward her through a chain of people who had made commitments and honored them. Warren, she said. Yeah. Did my father know this would happen? She said. Not this specifically, but did he know it would come to something like this, that the promise would actually be needed? Warren thought about this. She could hear the honest weight of it. He hoped it wouldn't, Warren said, but he built it as though it would. That's who he was. A pause. He never built anything for the best case. He built things for the case where the best case didn't come through. She sat with that. Get some sleep, she said. You too, he said. She did not sleep. Not right away. She sat at the table a while longer in the quiet kitchen in the house in Ridgeback, Nevada, and she thought about her father building things, building the signal, building the network, building the promise, building all of it in advance of need in the specific way of a man who understands that love is not what you feel when things are going well. It is what you construct in the ordinary moments, so that when things go wrong, the construction is already there. She thought about what she had been building without knowing she was building it. 2 years of motion, 2 years of new towns and new names and new uniforms and the particular muscle memory of survival. All of that was also a construction, not a safe one, not a sustainable one, but a real one, built by a woman who had been told by the circumstances of her life that the only person she could depend on was herself and who had acted accordingly. And who had been wrong not because she was weak, but because the problem was never one person against one threat. It was always about what you built and who you built it with. She understood that now. At 12:52 in the morning in a house in Nevada with a compass on the table that had been pointing north for 30 years, she went to bed. She lay in the dark. This time she slept. Morning came in without ceremony. Laura was up at 6, showered, dressed, coffee made all before Chloe's alarm went off at 6:45. She heard the alarm and then the small sound of her daughter reaching across to shut it off and the longer silence of a child deciding whether to accept the requirement of the morning. Then the creak of the bed and the shuffle of small feet on the floor and the particular series of sounds that meant Chloe was performing her morning routine in the specific order she had established and would not deviate from because some things needed to be non-negotiable when everything else was uncertain. Laura understood that better now than she ever had. Chloe came into the kitchen in her school clothes and socks that did not match a consistent choice rather than an oversight Laura had long ago determined, and sat at the table and looked at the 3 objects still arranged there from the night before. The compass, the drawing, the letter refolded. Is that a compass? Chloe said. Yes, Laura said. Where'd it come from? Warren left it last night, Laura said. It was your grandfather's. Chloe picked it up with the careful reverence that children sometimes show for objects that have belonged to people they never met but feel they should have. She turned it in her hands. The needle found north with its patient, indifferent certainty. It always points the same way, Chloe said. That's what it does, Laura said. Chloe set it down on the table, looked at it for a moment with a serious expression. Mom, she said, are we going to have to move again? The question landed with the directness that only children could manage. No buildup, no softening, just the thing itself. Laura looked at her daughter. She thought about the letter in her jacket pocket. She thought about Rains and the warrant application and the file that Dex had been building since Wednesday. She thought about Nathan in a county jail and Carl Eichmann with a Colorado warrant arriving at his door by end of business today. She thought about Hyde, who had made a statement that read as a script, and Rains, who had been doing this for 19 years and knew the difference. No, Laura said. I don't think so. Chloe looked at her, the careful sideways look, the one that assessed whether the answer was real or a placeholder. She appeared to decide it was real. Okay, she said, and reached for the cereal box. Laura watched her daughter read the back of the cereal box and felt something move through her chest that was so large and so quiet she could not have named it if she tried. She did not try. Some things are better received than named. At 7:30, she drove Chloe to school herself, not Dolores herself, for the first time in 3 days, and she watched her daughter cross the parking lot and disappear through the front entrance, and she sat in the car for a long moment in the specific way she had been sitting in cars outside schools for the last 3 days. Except different. The calculation that had been running every time she watched that door close was not running now. Or it was running, but it had changed, had recalibrated around a different set of variables. Not where is the threat, what holds. She drove to the diner. Warren was there. Dex was there. Mick was there. The formation felt different than it had the morning before. Not the operational tightness of people managing an active situation, but something looser. The particular configuration of people who are in the middle of a long thing and have reached a moment where the immediate urgency has passed, but the work has not. Meredith poured coffee for everyone without being asked and made no comment about the number of people who had been occupying her diner for the past 3 days. That discretion was, Laura thought, worth more than most people would ever understand about her. Laura sat at the counter. Rains, she said, filed the warrant application at 8:15 this morning, Dex said. Given what she already has, the judge will move on it today. A pause. Colorado is separately building on the Mara Doyle file. That's going to take longer, but it's moving. Mom, Caslin, she said. Rains pulled him in for questioning at 7 this morning, Warren said. He's talking. Caslin is the kind of man who talks when he understands that not talking is the more expensive option. A pause. He's confirmed the high connection. He's confirmed the nature of the arrangement he had with Nathan's intermediary. He's given Rains enough to build the conspiracy charge properly. And Warren's expression did something complicated. High is currently sitting in a waiting room at the county public defender's office, he said. He went in to make a statement for Nathan and came out understanding that the statement he made may have implicated him in witness coordination. A pause. Dex flagged it to Rains last night. Rains flagged it to the DA this morning. She looked at Dex. How did you flag it? The statement High gave Rains used 3 specific phrases that appear verbatim in the notes from Nathan's initial intake interview, Dex said. Phrases that would not occur organically to someone describing a situation from their own perspective. They read as transcribed from an external source. He looked at her over his glasses. It takes about 4 minutes to build that case if you know what you're looking at. And Rains knew what she was looking at, Laura said. Rains has been doing this for 19 years, Dex said. She knew before I told her. I just gave her the documentation to support what she already understood. Laura sat with us for a moment. She thought about High in a waiting room, about a man who had sold information once to Nathan, once to what he thought was Nathan's benefit, and had arrived through the specific mathematics of his own choices at a position considerably worse than the one he had started from. She did not feel sympathy for him. She did not feel triumph either. What she felt was the particular clarity of watching a system work the way it was supposed to work, which was rare enough in her experience that it deserved acknowledgement. What about Eichmann? She said. Warren looked at her steadily. Colorado issued the warrant at 9:02 this morning, he said. Carl Eichmann was taken into custody at 9:47. Henderson, Nevada. Apparently he'd relocated from Colorado sometime in the last year. A pause. He was 300 miles from where Nathan told us he was. She looked at him. Henderson. Henderson, Warren said. Same county where Caslin's cousin ran the collections business. She absorbed that. Carl Eichmann, the man Nathan had retained, the man whose arrangement had operated as a dead man switch for 3 minutes in a cracked parking lot at the old mining office, had been in Henderson, Nevada. He had been close, much closer than Nathan had allowed her to believe. Whether that was deliberate misdirection or simply Nathan not knowing exactly where his people were, she couldn't determine. It didn't matter now. Is he talking? She said. Not yet, Warren said. But Dex thinks he'll talk, Dex said simply. The transfer records connect him to a probable homicide and a conspiracy charge in 2 states. The math on cooperation is not complicated. The morning moved, the diner filled with its regular population. Chester at his stool, a family from the highway, a table of construction workers who ate with the focused efficiency of men with a limited break and a lot of physical work ahead of them. Laura moved through her section with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this job for 14 months and had at various moments over the past 3 days wondered whether she would ever do it again with this specific quality of ordinary. She was refilling Chester's coffee when her phone buzzed. Raines. She stepped into the back hallway and answered. Warren issued 40 minutes ago, Raines said. We've executed the search on Nathan's vehicle and his room at the motel. I wanted you to hear this from me directly. A pause. Ms. Voss, we found documentation in the vehicle. Printed records, notes, a timeline. Another pause. He had been building this for 8 months. The legal filings, the welfare tip, the Caslin arrangement, all of it mapped out on paper. Dated entries. Laura leaned against the tile. 8 months, she said. The first dated entry is 9 days after you left Utah, Raines said. He started planning this the week you disappeared. A pause, Chihuahuas. The last entry is from the night before he walked into your diner. It says in his own handwriting, and I am reading this exactly, it says, she'll be in a position where running isn't possible. Then she'll have to deal. The hallway was very quiet. He was never here to talk, Laura said. No, Raines said. He wasn't. The Colorado woman, Laura said. Mara Doyle, is that? Colorado has opened a formal investigation based on the materials Dex provided and Eichmann's arrest, Raines said. I can't tell you how that resolves, but I can tell you it's being taken seriously by people who have the authority to take it seriously. She paused. You did everything right, Ms. Voss. I want you to know that. The signal, the documentation, the call you made at the mining office, all of it gave us what we needed to work with. Laura pressed her hand flat against the tile. 3 days ago, she had stood in the same hallway and pressed her hand against the same tile after learning that the man in the booth had followed her from Utah. 3 days ago, she had been calculating exits and distances in the geography of survival. She was still calculating. She would probably always calculate, but the variables had changed. Thank you, she said to Raines. Thank your father, Raines said. Whoever he was, he built something that works. She ended the call. She stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she straightened, pushed off the wall, and went back out to the counter. Warren looked at her, one question in the look. She answered it with a nod. Something in his face settled, not relief exactly, but the specific expression of a man watching a structure he has spent years building hold exactly the weight it was designed to hold. At 11:40, Meredith appeared from the kitchen and stood in the pass-through with her arms folded, and the expression of a woman who has been waiting for an appropriate moment and has decided this is it. I have a question, Meredith said. Laura looked at her. Okay. Are you planning on staying, Meredith said, in Ridgeback, in this diner, in that uniform? She gestured at Laura's apron with the no-nonsense directness of someone who had been running a business for long enough to know that uncertainty was its own kind of cost. Because I would like to know. Laura looked at her. She looked at the diner, the cracked vinyl, the 8 stools, the radio above the pass-through playing something with a fiddle, the window that still had a faint smear from where she had pressed her hand against the glass 2 days ago, watching High hold up his phone. Yes, she said, I'm staying. Meredith nodded once, the nod of a woman who had hoped for that answer and had been prepared to handle a different one. Good, she said. She went back to the kitchen. Warren, who had heard the exchange, picked up his coffee mug. He did not say anything. He didn't need to. She could read the expression, the warm thing beneath the load-bearing stillness, the thing that had been briefly visible on the porch last night, and was now back in its usual place behind the face that showed the world what it needed to show. At 2 in the afternoon, Ruiz came in and sat at the end of the counter and ordered pie. The apple pie specifically. He ate it with the focused, uncritical appreciation of a man who had been awake for a very long time and had reached the stage of exhaustion where simple things taste exactly like what they are. "How is it?" Laura asked, refilling his coffee. Ruiz looked at the plate, then at her. "Honest answer," he said, "always." "It's okay," he said, "for Nevada." She laughed at that, a real laugh, full and sudden, the kind that startles you because you didn't know it was coming. Ruiz looked surprised by it, then smiled, and the smile had the quality of something that had been waiting for the right moment. Around them, the diner continued its afternoon rhythms, unremarkable, ordinary, reliable, and outside on the highway, the trucks moved through and the winter light sat flat and thin on the desert, and in a school 7 miles away, a 7-year-old girl named Chloe was drawing something in art class that would probably also be a horse that looked like a ball, and the afternoon was just an afternoon. Mick left at 3 with the brief nod of a man who has completed what he came to do and does not require ceremony. Dex packed his laptop at 3:30 and shook Laura's hand with the brief, precise grip of someone who understood that the gesture covered everything that needed covering. Ruiz finished his pie and his coffee and stood and stretched with the full-body expression of a man who had been sitting in cars and standing in cold parking lots for 3 days and was ready for a bed. "It was good work," he said to Laura, not particularly as a compliment, but as a statement of fact, the way you acknowledge the weather. "It was your work," she said, "yours and theirs." "Ours," he said, and the correction was gentle and absolute. He left. And then it was Warren and Laura at the counter with Meredith moving quietly in the kitchen behind them, and the radio and the winter light coming through the front window at a low angle that made everything it touched look briefly and impractically beautiful. "Where do you go from here?" Laura said. Warren turned his mug in his hands. "Deacon wants to head back through Arizona," he said. "Visit some people. It's been a while." A pause. "Mick has a project in New Mexico he's been putting off. Ruiz has his sister's birthday next week." He paused. "Dex is already driving." "And you," she said. He looked at her with the expression she had learned to read, the one that was almost warm, the one that lived just below the load-bearing surface. "I'll ride for a few days," he said. "Clear my head. Think." A pause, "and then probably come back through Ridgeback sometime. Check in." "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "I want you to," she said. "That's different." He looked at her for a moment. Really looked the way he had looked at her in the diner 2 days ago when she had raised 3 fingers and he had seen and understood and had not reacted in the way that would have given anything away. The same quality of looking. The same steadiness. "Then I will," he said. She nodded. He stood from the counter, put on his jacket, paid his bill, exacting cash, no discussion, and looked at her one more time with an expression that was complete and needed nothing added to it. "James would be proud," he said. She looked at the counter for a moment. At the ring her coffee mug had left on the laminate surface. At the scratch in the laminate at the corner where someone years ago had dragged something heavy across it. At all the ordinary accidental evidence of ordinary life that surrounded her. "I know," she said. "I think I'm starting to let myself believe that." Warren put his hand briefly on the counter, between them, not touching her, just placing it there, the way you place a hand on something to confirm it is real and solid and present before you let go of it. Then he picked up his jacket and walked to the door and pushed it open and went out into the cold Nevada afternoon. She heard the Harley start. She did not go to the window. She did not need to see it. She had already cataloged the sound, had already learned it well enough that she would recognize it anywhere, in any crowd of engines at any distance. The sound of a promise made and kept. The sound of her father's love expressed in the only form it had ever taken, practical, structural, patient, and already in place before she knew she needed it. The engine faded. The highway took it. The diner was quiet. Meredith came to the counter and refilled Laura's coffee without being asked and sat on the stool that Chester usually occupied and folded her hands around her own mug and looked at Laura with the directness of a woman who has been a keeper of other people's silences for long enough to know when a silence is full and when it needs something in it. "You okay?" Meredith said. Laura looked at her coffee, at the window, at the street outside where nothing threatening moved, where the ordinary trucks and ordinary cars of an ordinary Nevada afternoon went about their ordinary business. Yeah, she said, I am. And this time, for the first time in a very long time, the word came out whole. 3 days after Warren rode out of Ridgeback, the first piece of real news came through Dex. Not through Rains, not through Warren. Through Dex, who called Laura's cell at 7:40 in the morning while she was standing at the pass-through calling back a breakfast order, and who said without preamble, because preamble was not something Dex did, Carl Eichmann is cooperating. He started talking last night. Colorado has a formal statement. I thought you should know before you heard it somewhere else. Laura set the coffee pot down on the counter with a care that was more deliberate than the situation required. What did he say? Enough, Dex said. He confirmed the financial arrangement. He confirmed the timeline. He confirmed the nature of the work he was retained to do in 2016. A pause. He also confirmed that Nathan contacted him again 6 weeks before driving to Nevada, that the Nevada arrangement was active. Active meaning you were on the list, Dex said. Simply, the way he said everything. You and Chloe both. She stood at the counter of Ridgeback Diner with the coffee pot in her hand and the radio playing above the pass-through, and Chester at his regular stool reading his regular paper, and she felt the ground shift one final time. Not the slow rain-soaked shifting of the past 4 days, but something more complete. The specific sensation of a thing that has been threatening to fall finally landing, and finding that the landing, as terrible as the anticipation of it had been, was survivable, was already survived. Thank you, Dex, she said. Ms. Voss, he said, for what it's worth, and I've been doing this work for 11 years, what you did at that mining office was the thing that broke it open. Not the file, not the documentation. You. A pause. Your father would have called that field work. I'm calling it the same thing. He ended the call. She stood there for a moment. Then she picked up the coffee pot and went back to work. The news moved through the next 2 weeks the way legal news moves in fragments, in language stripped of drama, in the specific, dry vocabulary of motions and hearings, in arraignments and continuances. Rains called with updates that were thorough and precise and delivered without editorializing, because Rains was a professional, and professionals do not editorialize. Nathan's charges were federal on the interstate violation state, on the welfare fraud, and a third category that the DA was building carefully with the Colorado materials, an Eichmann statement. The warrant for Caslin had gone through. High had retained his own attorney and was cooperating in exchange for a reduced charge that Dex described as an appropriate trade, given what they had on him. Carl Eichmann, faced with the specific mathematics of 2 states and a probable homicide, had decided that the most available path was the one that ran directly through Nathan Vale. Laura absorbed all of it. She went to work. She picked up Chloe from school. She made dinner and helped with homework and checked the locks still every night, because 2 years of muscle memory did not dissolve in 2 weeks, and she did not require it to. The checking of locks was not fear anymore. It was habit, and habit was not the same thing. On a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the Thursday that changed everything, she was wiping down the counters after the morning rush when Chloe walked through the front door of the diner, wearing her backpack and carrying a folded piece of paper, with the look of a person delivering something important. Laura looked at her. School doesn't let out until 3. It's a half day, Chloe said. She put the folded paper on the counter. Dolores brought me. She's in the car. She said to tell you she's fine waiting. Laura looked at the paper. What is this? I made something, Chloe said. Open it. She unfolded it. It was a drawing more detailed than the previous ones, which told her that Chloe had spent real time on it. A diner identifiable by the counter and the stools. 4 motorcycles outside, rendered with improved anatomical accuracy, the wheels more proportional, the engines suggested rather than implied. 4 figures on bar stools drawn in the specific expressive shorthand of a child who has decided the emotional content matters more than the physical accuracy. And in the center of the drawing, a woman behind the counter with her hand raised and 3 fingers extended. Laura looked at it for a long time. That's you, Chloe said, pointing to the figure with the raised hand. And that's Warren and the others. She pointed to the 4 stools. And that's the signal Grandpa taught you. She paused. You told me about it. Remember last week when I asked about the compass? I remember, Laura said. I wanted to draw it, Chloe said, because I think it's the most important part of the whole story, not the scary stuff, that part. She pointed again to the raised hand, the 3 fingers, because Grandpa put it there before it was needed. And that's the kind of thing that doesn't happen by accident. Laura looked at her daughter, 7 years old and already understanding something that had taken Laura 34 years to fully receive. The look on Chloe's face was the serious one, the expression she wore like weather, but underneath it something else was present. Pride, maybe, or the specific satisfaction of a child who has made something that says exactly what she meant it to say. "It's the best drawing you've ever done," Laura said. "I know," Chloe said, not modestly, just as a statement of fact, the way she said most true things. Meredith appeared from the kitchen, saw Chloe and poured a glass of milk without being asked and set it on the counter. "You want pie," she said. "Is it good?" Chloe said. "It's the best in Nevada," Meredith said. Chloe looked at her mother. "People keep saying that," she said. "Sit down and find out for yourself," Laura said. Chloe sat down at this counter. She ate the pie. Laura watched her daughter eat pie at the counter of a diner in Ridgeback, Nevada, and felt the ordinary, extraordinary weight of a morning that was simply a morning. Not a calculation, not a contingency plan, not a set of options organized by probability of survival. A morning. Her daughter at a counter eating pie. The radio playing something with a fiddle. Meredith doing paperwork in the back. Chester at his stool. "It's pretty good," Chloe announced after the third bite. "High praise," Meredith called from the kitchen without looking up. "For Nevada," Chloe added. It was on a Friday 4 weeks after that the call came that Laura had not let herself anticipate, because anticipating things that mattered had cost her before, and she had learned to hold the important things loosely until they were confirmed by more than hope. Raines called at 11 in the morning. "The Colorado DA filed charges this morning," she said. "Voluntary manslaughter in the Mara Doyle case. Eichmann has pleaded guilty and is cooperating fully. Nathan Vale has been named as a co-conspirator." A pause. "Combined with the federal charges here, he is not going to be in a position to threaten anyone for a very long time." Laura sat down on the stool at the end of the counter, the one that wobbled, the one she had noted on her first day as a stool to avoid, and sat on it anyway and felt it wobble slightly beneath her and didn't move. "How long?" she said. "His attorney is already in discussions about a plea," Raines said. "Given what Eichmann provided, given the federal interstate charges, given the Colorado co-conspirator charge, Dex can give you a better number than I can, but we're talking about a substantial sentence." She paused. "The kind that ends a particular chapter. The kind that ends a particular chapter." Laura sat on the wobbling stool and looked at the ring her coffee mug had left on the laminate surface and thought about chapters. About the chapter that had begun the morning her life split into before and after, and the 2 years that followed, and the Thursday 3 weeks ago, when 4 men had ridden into a cold Nevada town and ordered coffee and sat at a counter and changed the shape of what was possible. About a letter in a jacket pocket and a compass on a child's nightstand, and a drawing on the counter in front of her of a woman with her hand raised and 3 fingers extended. "Thank you," she said to Raines, "for everything." "You did the work," Raines said. "We just had the paperwork." A pause, the brief human pause of a professional who has something personal to add and is deciding whether to add it. She decided. "I read your father's letter 3 times, she said. "The first time for the case, the second time because I wanted to, the third time, oh," she stopped. "The third time I read it was because my own father died last year and I was looking for something in it that I can't fully describe." Another pause. "I found it." Laura pressed her hand flat against the counter, not the grounding reflex this time, something softer. "I'm glad," she said. She called Warren after she hung up. He answered on the second ring. She could tell by the sound of the wind behind his voice somewhere on a road. "Raines called," she said. "I know," he said. "She called me first. Wanted me to hear it before she called you in case I needed someone to talk to when I heard," Laura said. "Yeah," he said. She looked at the drawing on the counter, at the 4 figures on the 4 stools, at the woman with her hand raised. "It's over," she said. Not a question, not entirely, a statement being tested against the reality of saying it out loud. "The chapter he represented," Warren said. "Yes, it's over." She understood the distinction. The chapter Nathan Vale represented was over. The things that chapter had produced, the 2 years of running the new towns, the new names, the muscle memory of survival, those were not over. They were hers now, hers to carry differently, hers to put down piece by piece at whatever pace was honest. That was not something a warrant resolved. That was something that happened slowly in ordinary moments, in the specific daily work of learning to live without the weight of a threat that had shaped every decision for so long it had become indistinguishable from the person making them. She knew that. She had always known it, even when she wasn't ready to say it. "Are you coming back through?" she said. "Next week," he said. "Maybe the week after. I've got something to handle in Arizona first." "No rush," she said. "Laura," he said. "Yeah." James knew, he said. "I want you to know that. When he built this, when he gave me the signal, when he wrote that letter, when he made the arrangements with Vera and the others, he wasn't afraid for you. He was proud of you. He told me that. Directly." A pause, the wind moving behind his voice. "He said she's going to be fine. She doesn't know that yet, but she will." She sat on the wobbling stool and let that land without managing it, without compressing it into something portable. She let it take up the full space it was entitled to. "He was right," she said. "Eventually." "He usually was," Warren said. "Don't tell Deacon I said that." She almost laughed. Almost, and then did the full real laugh, the one that startled her because she hadn't known it was there. She heard something on Warren's end that she recognized after a moment as his version of the same thing. Brief, barely there, but present. "Drive safe," she said. "Always," he said. She put the phone in her apron pocket and sat at the counter for another moment. Around her, the diner continued its Friday morning rhythms, a table of highway workers, an elderly couple she didn't recognize, who were probably passing through Meredith's voice in the back, asking Danny about the soup special. The radio above the pass-through playing something old and sad and good. Chester at his stool with his paper. The wobbling stool, wobbling slightly beneath her, with the specific unreliable qualities she had noted and cataloged and warned people about for 14 months. She looked at the drawing on the counter. She picked it up and took it back to the small bathroom at the back of the diner and looked at it and looked at her face in the mirror above the sink. Really looked in the way she had avoided for 2 years because the mirror had shown her things she wasn't ready to inventory. The tiredness was still there. It did not disappear in 3 weeks. But something else was there now, something that had been absent so long she had to look at it sideways to recognize it. Not happiness exactly, not relief, something older and more structural than either. The particular expression of a person who has found the ground beneath their feet and is beginning slowly and with appropriate caution to trust that it will hold. She went back out. She taped the drawing to the wall behind the counter between the daily specials board and the calendar where she could see it from anywhere in the room. Meredith came out of the kitchen and looked at it for a moment. "Is that a diner?" Meredith said. "It's this diner," Laura said. Meredith looked at the 4 figures on the 4 stools, at the woman with the raised hand, at the 4 motorcycles outside. She stood there for a moment with her arms folded and the expression of a woman reading something that has answered a question she had been carrying for a while. "Your daughter drew this," she said. "Yes." Meredith looked at it for another moment. "She's got her mother's eye," she said. Not a compliment exactly, a fact. Then she went back into the kitchen. Laura stood at the counter and looked at the drawing and thought about eyes. About what it meant to have an eye for something, for the detail that mattered, for the angle that revealed, for the thing that other people passed over, because it was too small or too quiet or too ordinary to require attention. Her father had that eye. He had looked at a 9-year-old girl at a kitchen table and seen not just the child in front of him, but the woman she would become and the situations that woman would face, and he had acted on what he saw with the patient, practical love of a man who understood that preparation was the most honest form of faith. She had that eye too. She had always had it, had used it for 2 years to stay alive, to read rooms and exits and the gap between what people said and what they meant. What she was learning now was that the same eye could be turned towards something other than survival, toward the drawing on the wall, toward the wobble of a stool, toward the way Meredith moved through a kitchen with the particular efficiency of someone who has been exactly where she is for a very long time and has stopped pretending to be anywhere else, toward her daughter's face when she was explaining something she had figured out herself and was proud of the figuring. The same eye pointed differently. That was not a small thing, that was the whole thing. 2 weeks later on a Wednesday, that felt like all the other Wednesdays Ridgeback had offered, and nothing like the Wednesday 3 weeks before that Warren came back. She heard the Harley before she saw it, the specific low register of it, the ground-level vibration that she had learned once from a distance and once from the inside of, and would not mistake for anything else. She was at the counter refilling Chester's coffee when the sound reached her, and she set the pot down and did not go to the window because she did not need to. She knew. He came through the door the way he had come through it the first time, without making an entrance, without announcement, in the particular way of a man who does not perform arrival. Because arrival is simply the next thing after travel, not a statement about either. He sat at the counter, the same stool, the one that had always been his in the 10 days since she had known him, and he turned his coffee cup right side up without looking at it. She poured without being asked. He wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at her, and she looked at him, and nothing was said for a moment, which was the right amount of nothing. "How's the pie?" he said finally. "Chester says it's improved," she said. "I haven't changed anything." "Chester's a reliable source," Warren said. "He reads the same newspaper every day 3 times, she said, "for the comfort of the routine." "Smart man," Warren said. She leaned against the counter across from him. Outside the window, the Nevada morning was doing what Nevada mornings did in December, pressing cold and thin light against everything, making the ordinary look briefly significant. She was aware of it in the way she was aware of most things now, not cataloging it as a threat, just noticing, just letting it be what it was. "Deacon, send something," Warren said. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced an envelope smaller than her father's different handwriting, the deliberate printed letters of a large man who wrote carefully because he knew his hands were better suited for other things. He set it on the counter. She looked at it. "What is it?" "Open it," he said. She opened it. Inside was a single card, not a letter, a card the kind you buy at a gas station because it's the only option for 20 miles and you need to say something, and you are not the kind of man who goes without saying it when it needs to be said. On the front, a printed image of the desert at sunset. On the inside, in Deacon's careful printed letters, "You held the line. That matters more than you know. D." She read it twice. She set it on the counter next to her father's drawing, which she had moved from the wall to a spot behind the register where she could see it throughout her shift, and she looked at both of them for a moment. "Tell him I said thank you," she said. "You can tell him yourself," Warren said. "He's coming back through in January." She looked at him. "They're all coming back. Ruiz has a thing in Utah first," Warren said. "But after." He picked up his coffee. "This tends to be how it works. People come back to where things happened." A pause. "Especially when things happen the right way." She thought about that, about the specific gravity of a place where something significant had occurred, how it pulled people back not because they needed to relive it, but because they needed to confirm that the ground was still there, that what happened was real, that the version of events they carried was accurate. "Mick," she said. "Already in New Mexico," Warren said. "He'll be through in February at the latest." "And Dex?" "Dex doesn't come back to places," Warren said. "Dex moves forward. It's his nature." A pause. "He sent this, though." He reached back into his jacket and produced a folded document, legal-looking, several pages stapled. He set it on the counter next to the card. She picked it up and unfolded it. It was a summary, decked summary, clean and precise, and organized chronologically of the complete legal situation as of that week. Nathan's plea negotiations, which had moved faster than expected because Eichmann's cooperation had left Nathan's defense with very little to work with. The Colorado charges, the projected sentencing range, the status of the civil protective order, which had been converted from the Utah temporary order to a permanent federal injunction. The language in the injunction, specific and comprehensive and drafted, she could tell by its precision, with Dex's direct input. She turned to the last page. At the bottom below the final paragraph, Dex had written a note in his small, exact handwriting. The injunction covers all states, all contact, all proxies. It has teeth. He is not coming back. He is not coming back. She folded the document carefully. She set it on the counter. She put her hands flat on the laminate surface and looked at them for a moment, at her own hands, which had been steady for 3 weeks. In a way, they had not been steady for 2 years, and which had learned over those 2 years to be useful in the specific way of hands, that know they may need to act and so are always slightly braced for it, in which were now for the first time simply resting. "You okay?" Warren said. "I'm reading the part," she said, "where it's actually over." What's it say? She looked at him. It says he's not coming back. Warren picked up his coffee and looked at the window and said nothing for a moment. The nothing was full. It had weight and texture and the specific quality of a silence that has been earned rather than arrived at by default. No, Warren said, he's not. She picked up the coffee pot and refilled his mug and set the pot back on the warmer and turned to face the diner. Chester at his stool, the highway workers at their usual table, the elderly couple who had been coming in every Wednesday morning for the past 2 weeks, who she had learned were named Frank and Edna, and were driving slowly from Oregon to their daughter's house in Arizona, and had discovered Ridgeback Diner the way most people discovered it by accident. By the specific accident of needing coffee and finding a lit sign in the dark, and who had apparently decided to extend their route by 2 weeks because the coffee was good and Frank liked the eggs, and Edna liked the way Meredith folded the napkins. Laura liked knowing that. She liked knowing specific things about specific people in a specific place and not having to hold them loosely in case she needed to leave them behind. That was new. That was worth noticing. At noon, Chloe arrived. Not a half day this time. School was out for the afternoon because of a staff development day, and Dolores had brought her by and waited from the car with the cheerful efficiency of a woman who enjoyed being useful and had found over the past 3 weeks considerably more opportunities to be useful than she usually did. Chloe came through the front door wearing her backpack and the expression that meant she had information to deliver. Warren's bike is outside, she said to her mother. I know, Laura said. Chloe looked at Warren at the counter. Warren looked at Chloe. A mutual assessment, each of the other, with the specific seriousness they both brought to assessment as a practice. You came back, Chloe said. I said I would, Warren said. People say things, Chloe said. Some people do, Warren said. Some people mean them. Chloe considered this for a moment. The apple pie is better this week, she said. I think it's the apples. Mom got different apples. Is that right? Warren said. Same recipe, Chloe said, climbing onto the stool next to him with the practiced ease of a child who has decided this is her stool and the decision is final. Different apples make a difference. That's usually how it works, Warren said. Laura watched her daughter settle onto the stool next to Warren and unfold a worksheet from her backpack and begin working on it with the same focused efficiency she brought to every task she had decided mattered. She watched Warren watch Chloe for a moment. The expression on his face, the one she had learned, was his version of warmth, which did not look like most people's version of warmth, but was unmistakably the same substance. She thought about her father sitting at a table in Vera's house, the same chair both times, working something out, leaving clearer. She thought about what it meant to have a table to come back to, a counter, a stool, a specific place in a specific town where specific people knew your name and your order and the particular way you held a coffee mug and did not require you to explain yourself before extending something that looked from the inside very much like belonging. She had not had that in 2 years. She had not let herself have it because having it meant being findable, and being findable had felt like being vulnerable. What she understood now, slowly the way understanding that changes everything tends to come, was that the vulnerability was always there. Running did not remove it. Running just meant you were vulnerable alone. Standing still, surrounded by people who had made commitments and honored them, was a different kind of vulnerability entirely. The kind that could hold. At 2 in the afternoon, Meredith came out of the kitchen and did something Laura had not seen her do in the middle of a shift before. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the counter, not behind it at it, and looked at the drawing taped behind the register, and looked at Warren, and looked at Laura, and put her mug down with the particular deliberateness of a woman who has arrived at a moment she has been approaching for some time. I want to say something, Meredith said. They looked at her. 14 months ago, Meredith said, a woman pulled into my parking lot at 11 at night with a child asleep in the back seat and $40-something in her wallet and asked me for a job. She looked at Laura. I gave her the job because I've been running this diner for 22 years and I've gotten good at reading people. And what I read in her was someone who was not asking for charity. She was asking for a fighting chance. A pause. I don't know all of what happened. I know some of it. I know enough. She looked at Warren. I know you kept a promise that most men would have let expire. I know what that's worth. She picked up her mug. I'm not a person who makes speeches. This is not a speech. This is just She stopped, the plain-spoken woman searching for the plain-spoken word. This is just me saying that I'm glad you're both here, and that this is a good diner, and that the best thing that happened to it in 22 years walked in 14 months ago at 11 at night with $43 and a kid who names goldfish after navigational concepts. Chloe looked up from her worksheet. Navigator is very smart, she said in case this was in question. I don't doubt it, Meredith said. She picked up her mug and went back into the kitchen. Warren looked at Laura. Laura looked at Warren. Between them in the space that was neither silence nor speech, something settled into place, not dramatically, not with the weight of the last 3 weeks, but with the particular quiet completeness of things that have arrived where they were always going. The afternoon came and went. Chester finished his paper, all 3 reads of it, and settled his bill with the $2 extra he always left the specific generosity of a man who had been coming to the same place for long enough to understand that the extra $2 was not a tip. It was a commitment. It said, I am coming back. The highway workers left in a cluster of noise and scraped chairs. Frank and Edna lingered over their coffee the way they always did, unhurried, comfortable in the way of people who have stopped rushing because they have identified what is worth staying for. At 3:45, Laura's phone buzzed. She looked at it, a number she didn't recognize. She felt the old reflex, the bracing, the calculation, the reach for options. She felt it, and she let it pass through her without acting on it, the way you let a current pass through your hand if you know where you're standing and you know the ground will hold. She answered. Ms. Voss, a woman's voice. Warm, professional. My name is Sandra Kress. I'm a victim's advocate with the Colorado DA's office. I've been assigned to the Mara Doyle case. A pause. I understand you provided documentation that was instrumental in reopening the investigation. I wanted to reach out personally. Yes, Laura said. We've been in contact with Mara Doyle's sister, Sandra said. Her name is Patricia. She's been waiting 8 years for this. A pause. What? She asked me to thank you. I know you didn't know Mara, but what you did in the documentation your team provided gave Patricia something she hasn't had. Another pause. She called it closure, but I think what she meant was something more specific than that. She said she finally knows the truth. And she said to tell whoever made that possible that the truth matters, even when it comes late. Laura pressed her hand against the counter. Please tell Patricia, she said, that I'm glad, and that I'm sorry it took so long. She knows, Sandra said. She said to tell you she knows. Laura ended the call. She stood at the counter for a moment. Warren, who had not gone anywhere, who had simply been at the counter, being the specific weight and presence he had been since the first day, looked at her. Colorado, he said. Mara Doyle's sister, she said. Patricia. Warren was quiet. He turned his mug in his hands, both hands the bilateral warmth of it, the grounding she had noticed and had unconsciously adopted as her own. He turned it once, set it down. 8 years, he said. She said the truth matters, even when it comes late. He looked at the counter, at the ring his mug had left, at the scratch in the laminate at the corner where someone years ago had dragged something heavy across it, at all the ordinary accidental evidence of ordinary life. Yeah, he said, it does. Chloe had been listening in the way she always listened, with full attention and no performance of attention, the thing her serious expression actually meant. She looked at her mother. Who is Mara? She said. Laura looked at her daughter. She thought about how to answer. Not how to deflect, not how to construct a version appropriate for a 7-year-old, but how to answer honestly in the way her father had always answered her, which was to trust that the person you were talking to was capable of holding the truth if you gave it to them, in a form that was real and not dressed up for comfort. Someone who needed help a long time ago, Laura said, and didn't have anyone to raise a signal for her or her. Chloe looked at her for a moment. At the drawing behind the register, the woman with her hand raised, 3 fingers extended, then back at her mother. But we did, she said. We had the signal. We had the signal, Laura said. And we had Warren. Chloe looked at Warren, and Deacon, and Mick, and Ruiz, and Dex. She said in the tone of a person who intends to give full credit. And Vera, Warren said. And Dolores, Chloe added. And Meredith, Laura said. And Chester, Chloe said, looking at Chester's now empty stool with the seriousness of someone making a comprehensive list. Chester knew, Warren said. Chester notices everything, Laura said. He just keeps it to himself. Warren looked at Chester's empty stool. Smart man, he said again. At 5, the dinner prep began. Danny arrived and moved through the kitchen with his usual focused efficiency, producing the particular series of sounds that Laura had cataloged in her first week as the sound of a kitchen that knew what it was doing. Meredith came out to set the tables for the dinner crowd, a real dinner crowd, now not just the trickle of highway travelers, because word had moved through Ridgeback in the past few weeks in the specific way that word moves through small places, which was through Chester, who apparently did talk when the subject mattered enough. The diner was changing. Not dramatically, it was still Ridgeback. Diner still the cracked vinyl and the 8 stools and the radio above the pass-through and the lit sign on a dark road. But something in it was different. Something that had been present but unacknowledged was now simply present, the way furniture that was always in a room becomes visible when you change the light. Laura thought about that as she tied on a fresh apron for the dinner shift, about light and furniture, about the things that are present but require the right angle to become visible. Her father had been building something for years in the background of her life, building it in the spaces she wasn't looking, in the conversations she didn't have, in the men he trusted, in the promises he made, and the letter he wrote 6 months before he died with the patient. Deliberate handwriting of a man whose hands were better suited to engines than pens. She had not been able to see it because she had been looking at the wrong thing. She had been looking at Nathan, at the specific shape and texture of the threat in front of her, and had not looked at what was being built behind her in her direction pointed at the moment when she would need it. She was going to tell Chloe this someday. Not all of it, some of it would wait until Chloe was older and the vocabulary for it was available on, but the shape of it is the principle underneath. That the people who loved you practically were the ones doing things you couldn't see yet. That preparation was love expressed in the future tense. That what her grandfather had built for her mother had also been built for Chloe by extension by inheritance. By the specific mathematics of love that does not stop at one generation, but moves forward through every person who receives it and chooses to carry it forward. She was going to tell her that the signal was hers too now. That she could practice it. That she did not need to use it. But that it was there, and it had been there before she needed it, and it would be there after, because that was how it worked. That was what held. At 6, Warren stood up from the counter and put on his jacket. He moved to the register and paid his bill in cash. Exact no discussion, the same as always, and paused and looked at the drawing taped behind the register for a long moment. "That's a good drawing," he said. "She's got her mother's eye." Laura said the same thing Meredith had said because it was still true. Warren looked at the drawing. At the 4 figures on the 4 stools, at the woman with her hand raised, at the motorcycles outside with their implied engines and oversized wheels and their absolute presence at the bottom of the page, anchoring everything above. "Your father gave me something to carry for 3 years, he said, "and I've been thinking about what it means now that it's been delivered." He paused. "I think what it means is that the carrying isn't done. I think that's just how these things work. The carrying doesn't stop, it changes what it's carrying." Laura looked at him. "What are you carrying now?" He looked at her for a moment. "The next part," he said, not dramatically, not with weight, just as information stated plainly the way he stated everything that was true. Then he walked to the door and pushed it open and went out into the cold Nevada evening. She heard the Harley start. She heard it idle for a moment in the parking lot. The low, steady, ground-level sound of it, the sound that had been the soundtrack of the last 3 weeks in various distances and registers. Then she heard it move, pulling out of the lot onto the highway heading south. Unhurried, moving at the pace of a man who knows where he's going and has learned to take the road as it comes. She stood at the counter and listened until the sound was gone. Chloe, who was still at the counter finishing her homework, did not look up. "He'll come back," she said. "I know," Laura said. "He said he would," Chloe said. "He did," Laura said, "and he's the kind of person who means it," Chloe said. Then she turned a page in her worksheet and kept writing because the matter was settled, and settled things did not require additional discussion. Laura looked at the drawing behind the register, at the signal, at the 4 stools, at the motorcycles with their suggested engines and their absolute grounded presence, at the bottom of the image holding everything above them in place. She looked at it for a long moment in the last of the evening light. Then she turned to the dinner crowd coming through the door, and she smiled a real smile, not the tired, careful one she had worn like a uniform for 2 years, but the one that lived underneath the one that her face had been holding in reserve for a moment exactly like this. And she said, "Welcome to Ridgeback Diner. Sit anywhere you like." And for the first time in 2 years, she meant it without reservation, without calculation, without the quiet interior inventory of exits and distances and contingencies that had run beneath every ordinary thing she had said and done and survived. Just the words, just the smile, just a woman standing behind a counter in a diner in Nevada in the town where she had stopped running and started standing in the place that her father had sent people ahead to hold for her until she arrived. She had arrived, and the signal 3 fingers raised in a diner on a cold Thursday in November had been answered the way her father always intended, not with rescue, but with the one thing that mattered more than rescue, with people who stayed, with a promise kept across 3 years and 300 miles delivered by a silver-haired man, with a load-bearing stillness and a compass in his saddlebag, and 11 years of riding with James Voss, who had known his daughter well enough to build her safety net before she knew she was falling. Laura Voss was not falling anymore. She was home.